The hotel manager called me, and his voice was trembling like a leaf in a storm. "Mr. Blackwood, sir, I think there has been a terrible mistake. Your wife checked in yesterday under your name, but she is with another man." I laughed a dry, humorless sound and told him that was impossible because my wife was across town watching our grandchildren. There was a long, painful silence on the other end before he whispered, "Sir, please come to the front desk right away. She is wearing a red dress, and the man she is with is holding a Bible." That was the moment my life ended and my revenge began. Before I tell you how I destroyed their lives without lifting a finger, please tell me in the comments where you are listening from. If you have ever been betrayed by the people you built a world for, hit that like button and subscribe. My name is Cyrus Blackwood. I am 71 years old and my hands are rough like sandpaper. That is what happens when you spend 50 years hauling concrete, laying bricks, and building foundations for other people's dreams. I started my construction company with nothing but a rusty pickup truck and a shovel, and by the time I retired, I had built half the suburbs in this county. I am a man of silence. I listen more than I speak, and I observe more than I show. For 45 years, I thought I was building a legacy for my family. I thought the sweat on my brow and the ache in my back were the price of their happiness. I was wrong. It was a Tuesday afternoon, the kind of humid, sticky day we get down here in Georgia that makes the air feel heavy on your skin. I was sitting on my front porch, the one I built with my own 2 hands, drinking a glass of iced tea. I looked out at the lawn, perfectly manicured, and the big oak tree that had been a sapling when my wife Odessa and I moved in. It was quiet, a peaceful quiet, or so I thought. Odessa had left early that morning. She told me our daughter Jasmine needed help with the kids because the nanny had called in sick. Odessa was always doing that, always sacrificing her time for the family. She was a saint in the eyes of our community, a pillar of the First Baptist Church, a woman who wore hats on Sundays and baked pies for the sick. I sat there thinking about how lucky I was to have a woman who at 69 still had the energy to chase after toddlers. I took a sip of my tea, the ice clinking against the glass, and closed my eyes. I was thinking about the dinner I would make for her when she got home. Maybe some catfish and collard greens, her favorite. I wanted to treat her because she worked so hard. That was when my phone rang. It was a number I did not recognize, but I answered it anyway. It was the general manager of the Regal, the finest hotel in downtown Atlanta. I knew the place well because back in my contracting days, I handled the renovation of their West Wing. They treated me like royalty. They gave me a VIP membership that I rarely used because Odessa always said hotels were a waste of money when we had a perfectly good home. "Mr. Blackwood," the manager said, and I could hear the nervousness in his voice. "I am so sorry to disturb you, sir, but we have a flag on your account. There seems to be a discrepancy with the loyalty points being used for the current stay." I frowned, setting my tea down on the porch railing. I told him there must be a mistake because I was sitting on my porch and I hadn't stayed at a hotel in 3 years. I told him to just cancel the charge and we could sort it out later. But he didn't hang up. He hesitated. "Sir, the reservation was made under your name to use your diamond status, but the credit card on file was used for room service last night, a rather large bill for champagne and lobster." I felt a cold prickle on the back of my neck. Champagne and lobster. I don't drink champagne, it gives me heartburn. And Odessa always complained that shellfish was too expensive. I asked him who checked in. He said Mrs. Odessa Blackwood. She presented her ID at the desk. I told him that was impossible. I told him my wife was at my daughter's house in the suburbs watching cartoons and making peanut butter sandwiches. I told him he needed to check his security cameras because someone had stolen my wife's identity. There was the sound of typing on a keyboard, then a sigh. "Mr. Blackwood." "I am looking at the footage from check-in yesterday. It is definitely Mrs. Blackwood. I know her from the Christmas party you hosted here 5 years ago. She is wearing a red evening gown. And, sir, she is not alone. The man with her, he signed for the extras." I froze. A red evening gown. Odessa didn't own a red evening gown. She wore modest blues and grays. She said red was too flashy for a woman of her age and standing in the church. I asked the manager to describe the man. He lowered his voice. "He is a tall gentleman, sir, bald head, wearing a gray suit. He is carrying a Bible with a leather cover." The world stopped spinning. I knew that description. I knew that suit. And I certainly knew that Bible. It belonged to Deacon Miller. Deacon Miller, who sat in the front pew every Sunday. Deacon Miller, who preached about the sanctity of marriage and the fires of hell for sinners. Deacon Miller, who shook my hand every week and called me Brother Cyrus. The manager asked me to come down to the front desk. He said there was something I needed to see before he processed the bill. I hung up the phone and sat there for a long time. The ice in my tea had melted, leaving a watery ring on the wood of the porch railing. The birds were still singing, the sun was still shining, but the world had turned gray. I felt a pain in my chest, not a heart attack, but the heavy, crushing weight of a life built on sand. I stood up slowly, my knees creaked. I walked to my driveway and climbed into my old Ford pickup truck. It was a 2015 model, reliable, sturdy, just like me. My son-in-law Garrett always made fun of it. He drove a leased BMW and called my truck a relic. I started the engine and backed out of the driveway. I didn't speed, I didn't drive recklessly. I drove with the steady, terrifying calm of a man who is driving to his own execution. The drive to the city took 40 minutes. I spent every minute of it trying to find an excuse. Maybe they were planning a surprise anniversary party for me. Maybe they were counseling a church member in trouble and needed a private place. But you don't order champagne and lobster for church counseling. You don't wear a red evening gown to plan a surprise party for a husband who hates surprises. The logic of a builder took over my mind. I deal in measurements, in concrete facts. If the foundation is cracked, the house will fall. And my foundation was cracking. I pulled up to the Regal. I didn't give my keys to the valet. I parked the truck myself in the garage, squeezing it between two luxury sedans. I walked into the lobby. It was gold and marble, smelling of expensive lilies and floor wax. I felt out of place in my polo shirt and work trousers, but I walked with my head high. I didn't go to the desk immediately. I saw the manager Marcus watching me from the counter, but I held up a hand. I wanted to see it with my own eyes. I found a large wingback chair in the corner of the lobby, positioned behind a large potted palm. I sat down and picked up a discarded newspaper. I didn't read a word. I just watched the elevators. My heart was thumping against my ribs like a trapped bird. 10 minutes passed, then 20. I watched businessmen shaking hands, tourists looking at maps, couples holding hands. And then the elevator bell dinged. The doors slid open. And there she was, Odessa, my Odessa. But not the woman I saw this morning in her bathrobe making oatmeal. This woman was radiant. She was wearing a dress the color of blood, tight enough to show curves I hadn't seen in years. Her hair was done up and she was wearing lipstick. She was laughing. It was a throaty, girlish laugh that I hadn't heard in decades. And holding her arm, guiding her out of the elevator like he owned her, was Deacon Miller. He wasn't wearing his church robes, of course. He was in a sharp gray suit, the top button of his shirt undone. He looked younger than his 55 years. He looked like a man who had won a prize. They weren't just walking together. They were intertwined. His hand rested on the small of her back, sliding down just a little too low for a friend. She leaned into him, whispering something in his ear that made him smile, a smile that was not holy. I watched them walk to the front desk to check out. I watched my wife, the mother of my child, the grandmother of my grandbabies, lean against the marble counter and stroke Deacon Miller's arm while he handed over the room key. They looked like a couple. They looked happy. Happier than she had ever looked sitting across from me at our kitchen table. I wanted to stand up. I wanted to scream. I wanted to march over there and tear that suit off his body and ask her why 45 years wasn't enough. I wanted to cause a scene that would make the evening news. The anger boiled in my gut, hot and sour like acid. But I didn't move. I stayed behind that palm tree. I am a builder. You don't take a sledgehammer to a wall until you know what is bearing the load. You assess the damage first. They walked out of the main doors into the bright sunlight. I saw the valet bring around Deacon's car. He opened the door for her, and before she got in, he kissed her. It wasn't a peck on the cheek. It was a long, deep kiss right there on the sidewalk. She kissed him back. She held his face with her hands that wore the wedding ring I bought her when we had nothing. When their car drove away, I finally stood up. My legs felt heavy, like I was wading through wet concrete. I walked to the front desk. Marcus, the manager, looked at me with pity in his eyes. I hated that look. I didn't want pity. I wanted ammunition. Mr. Blackwood, Marcus said softly. I am so sorry. I didn't say anything about feelings. I just asked for the receipt. I told him to print out everything. The room charge, the room service, the movies they ordered, the time they checked in and the time they checked out. I wanted a paper trail. Marcus printed it out and slid it across the counter in a discreet envelope. I opened it right there. $500 for dinner. $200 for a bottle of wine. I looked at the total. It was more than I used to make in a week when we were first married. I took out my phone and took a picture of the receipt. Then I asked Marcus if he could save the security footage of them at the desk. He nodded. For you, Mr. Blackwood, I will keep it on a separate drive. I thanked him and walked back to the garage. I sat in my truck for a long time staring at the steering wheel. I didn't cry. Tears are for sadness, and I wasn't sad anymore. I was empty. The love I had for Odessa didn't die in that moment. It was murdered. It was strangled by a red dress and a hypocrite's smile. I drove home. The house looked different now. It didn't look like a sanctuary. It looked like a stage where a bad play had been performed for 45 years. I parked the truck and went inside. The silence of the house was mocking me now. I went into the kitchen and poured the rest of the iced tea down the sink. I didn't want it anymore. I sat at the kitchen table and waited. I knew she would be coming home soon. She would come through that door wearing her sensible clothes, carrying her big purse, and she would lie to me. She would tell me about the grandkids. She would complain about her back hurting from picking up the baby. She would ask me what I did all day. And I would lie back. I realized then that the man who sat on the porch this morning was gone, that Cyrus was dead. The man sitting at the table now was someone else entirely. I was a man with a secret. I was a man with a plan. They thought I was just an old retired contractor, a simple man who was lucky to have such a sophisticated family. They thought I was blind. They thought I was deaf. They were about to find out that I was the one who built the walls they were living behind, and I was the only one who knew how to bring them down. I heard the garage door open, the sound of her car engine, the heavy thud of the door closing, footsteps in the hallway. Cyrus. Are you home? Her voice called out, cheerful, normal. The voice of a liar. I took a deep breath, smoothed my face into a mask of calm, and prepared for the performance of my life. I'm in the kitchen. Odessa, I called back. She walked in and she had changed clothes. She was wearing her gray slacks and a floral blouse. The red dress was gone. The makeup was wiped off. The hair was pulled back into its usual bun. She looked like my wife again, but I could smell it. Underneath the scent of cleaning wipes and baby powder, I could smell the faint, expensive perfume of the hotel lobby, and I could smell him. She walked over and kissed me on the cheek. Her lips were cold. Whew, what a day, she said, putting her purse on the counter. Those kids ran me ragged. Little Tina didn't want a nap, and the baby was fussy all afternoon. My back is killing me. I looked at her. I looked right into her eyes. How was the drive, I asked. Traffic bad, terrible, she said, not missing a beat. Construction on I-85. Took me nearly an hour to get across town. I nodded slowly. Well, sit down, I said. I'll get you some water. You must be exhausted. She sat down, sighing dramatically, rubbing her lower back. You're such a good man, Cyrus, she said. I don't know what I'd do without you. I turned my back to her to fill a glass of water at the sink. My hand gripped the glass so hard I thought it might shatter. I knew exactly what she would do without me. She would check into the Regal with Deacon Miller and drink champagne. Here you go, I said, placing the water in front of her. She drank it down. Did you have a good day? She asked. Do anything interesting? I smiled. A slow, thin smile. Oh, just the usual, I said. Sat on the porch, thinking about the future, thinking about our investments. Her ears perked up. She stopped rubbing her back. Investments, she asked. What about them, I was just thinking, I said, leaning against the counter. We have worked hard, Odessa. Maybe it's time we made some changes. Maybe it's time we looked at where our money is really going. She looked at me, a flash of something sharp in her eyes. Panic, greed. It was hard to tell. Why bring that up now, she asked. Everything is fine, isn't it? Everything is perfect. I lied. I just want to make sure everyone gets what they deserve. That night, I waited until she was asleep. She snored softly, the sleep of the guilty who think they have gotten away with it. I slipped out of bed and went into my home office. I locked the door. I went to the floor safe hidden under the rug, the one only I knew the combination to. I spun the dial. Click, click, click. I opened the heavy steel door and pulled out the file labeled House Deed. I opened it. The papers were shuffled. They weren't in the order I always kept them. Someone had been in my safe. Someone had moved the deed. I checked the other folders. The life insurance policy was on top. The beneficiary page was dog-eared. I sat back on my heels on the cold floor. This wasn't just an affair. An affair is a crime of the heart. This was a crime of the wallet. This was a heist. My wife wasn't just sleeping with the deacon, she was planning something. And judging by the way she talked about my daughter Jasmine needing money last week, the whole family might be in on it. My phone buzzed in my pocket, a notification from my bank app, a withdrawal alert, $5,000 cash withdrawn from the joint savings account at an ATM in the casino district. I looked at the time, 2:00 a.m. Odessa was asleep in the other room. So who had my card? Or rather, who had her card? I knew then that this was bigger than a hotel room. This was a dismantling of my life. They were picking my bones clean while I was still breathing. I closed the safe and locked it. I stood up in the dark office, the shadows stretching long across the floor. I didn't go back to bed. I sat in the leather chair watching the moon rise through the window. They wanted my money. They wanted my house. They wanted to replace me with a younger, flashier model while spending the fortune I built with my own sweat. I picked up a pen and a notepad. At the top of the page, I wrote one word: demolition. If they wanted to play games, we would play. But they forgot one thing. I am the one who built the structure. I know where the load-bearing walls are, and I know exactly where to place the dynamite to bring the whole thing down without getting a speck of dust on my boots. Tomorrow the family was coming over for dinner. Jasmine and her husband Garrett, the whole happy clan. I would smile, I would cook, and I would start setting the charges. The first explosion was going to be silent, but it would shatter their world. I drove home with a heaviness in my chest that felt like I had swallowed wet cement. The house I had built with my own 2 hands stood at the end of the driveway, but it did not look like my home anymore. It looked like a stage set where a terrible play was being performed. I parked my old truck and walked inside. The silence that usually brought me peace now felt cold and suffocating. I walked through the living room and ran my hand along the mantelpiece. Dust. Odessa always kept this house spotless, but I realized I had not seen her with a duster in weeks. The house felt neglected just like me. I went into the kitchen and poured the rest of my iced tea down the sink. I sat at the kitchen table and waited. I knew the routine. She would come through the door wearing her sensible clothes and carrying her big purse, and she would lie to me. I heard the garage door open, the sound of her car engine dying, the heavy thud of the door closing, footsteps in the hallway. "Cyrus, are you home?" Her voice called out cheerful and normal. It was the voice of a liar. I took a deep breath and smoothed my face into a mask of calm. "I am in the kitchen, Odessa," I called back. She walked in and she had changed clothes. She was wearing her gray slacks and a floral blouse. The red dress was gone. The makeup was wiped off. The hair was pulled back into its usual bun. She looked like my wife again, but I could smell it. Underneath the scent of cleaning wipes and baby powder, I could smell the faint, expensive perfume of the hotel lobby. And I could smell him. She walked over and kissed me on the cheek. Her lips were cold. "Whew, what a day," she said, putting her purse on the counter. "Those kids ran me ragged. Little Tina did not want to nap and the baby was fussy all afternoon. My back is killing me from carrying him around." I looked at her. I looked right into her eyes. She did not blink. She did not look away. She was looking me in the face and lying about our grandchildren. "How was the drive?" I asked. "Traffic bad." "Terrible," she said, not missing a beat. "Construction on the interstate took me nearly an hour to get across town." I nodded slowly. I knew for a fact there was no construction on that route today because I had checked the traffic report before I drove to the hotel. She was building a wall of lies, brick by brick. "Well, sit down," I said. "I will get you some water. You must be exhausted." She sat down, sighing dramatically and rubbing her lower back. "You are such a good man, Cyrus," she said. "I do not know what I would do without you." I turned my back to her to fill a glass of water at the sink. My hand gripped the glass so hard I thought it might shatter. I knew exactly what she would do without me. She would check into the Regal with Deacon Miller and drink champagne. "Here you go," I said, placing the water in front of her. She drank it down without hesitation. "Did you have a good day?" she asked. "Do anything interesting?" I smiled a slow, thin smile. "Oh, just the usual," I said. Sat on the porch, thinking about the future, thinking about our investments. Her ears perked up. She stopped rubbing her back. "Investments?" she asked. What about them?" "I was just thinking," I said, leaning against the counter. "We have worked hard, Odessa. Maybe it is time we made some changes. Maybe it is time we looked at where our money is really going." She looked at me, and I saw a flash of something sharp in her eyes. It might have been panic or it might have been greed, It was hard to tell. "Why bring that up now?" she asked. "Everything is fine, isn't it? Everything is perfect." I lied. "I just want to make sure everyone gets what they deserve." That night I waited until she was asleep. She snored softly, the sleep of the guilty who think they have gotten away with it. I slipped out of bed and went into my home office. I locked the door behind me. I went to the floor safe hidden under the rug, the one only I knew the combination to. I spun the dial. Click, click, click. The sound was loud in the quiet house. I opened the heavy steel door and pulled out the file labeled House Deed. I opened it and my heart stopped. The papers were shuffled. They were not in the order I always kept them. Someone had been in my safe. Someone had moved the deed. I flipped through the pages. The property tax records from the last 3 years were missing. I checked the other folders. The life insurance policy was on top. The beneficiary page was dog-eared as if someone had been staring at it for a long time. My hands started to shake. It was not the tremor of an old man. It was the vibration of pure rage. This was not just an affair. An affair is a crime of the heart. This was a crime of the wallet. This was a heist. My wife was not just sleeping with the deacon, she was planning something. And judging by the way she talked about my daughter Jasmine needing money last week, the whole family might be in on it. I sat back on my heels on the cold floor. I felt like a fool. I thought I was the protector of this family. I thought I was the head of the household, but they had been picking my pockets while I slept. I looked at the empty space in the file where the tax returns should be. Those returns showed the true value of my assets. They showed the offshore accounts I had set up years ago for our retirement. If those were gone, it meant they knew about the money I had kept quiet for a rainy day. Suddenly, my phone buzzed in my pocket. The blue light of the screen illuminated the dark office. It was a notification from my bank app, a withdrawal alert. $5,000 cash withdrawn from the joint savings account at an ATM in the casino district. I stared at the numbers. $5,000. That was the daily maximum limit. I looked at the time. It was 2 a.m. Odessa was asleep in the other room. I could hear her snoring through the wall. So who had my card? Or rather, who had her card? It had to be someone she trusted. Someone she gave access to. My mind raced to my son-in-law, Garrett. He had a gambling problem years ago that he swore he fixed. Or maybe it was Deacon Miller. Maybe he needed cash for his holy work. I knew then that this was bigger than a hotel room. This was a dismantling of my life. They were picking my bones clean while I was still breathing. I closed the safe and locked it. I stood up in the dark office, the shadows stretching long across the floor. I walked quietly back to the bedroom. I stood in the doorway and looked at the woman sleeping in my bed. In the moonlight, she looked innocent. She looked like the woman I married 50 years ago. But that woman was dead. The person in that bed was a stranger. A stranger who wore my wife's face and used my name to check into hotels with another man. A stranger who gave away our life savings in the middle of the night. I felt a tear roll down my cheek, but I wiped it away angrily. I did not have time for grief. I needed to think like a contractor. When a building is rotten, you do not paint over it. You condemn it. You tear it down. I went back to the kitchen and sat in the dark. I watched the moon rise through the window. They wanted my money. They wanted my house. They wanted to replace me with a younger, flashier model while spending the fortune I built with my own sweat. They thought I was weak. They thought I was old. They thought I was stupid. I picked up a pen and a notepad from the counter. At the top of the page, I wrote one word: demolition. If they wanted to play games, we would play. But they forgot one thing. I am the one who built the structure. I know where the load-bearing walls are, and I know exactly where to place the dynamite to bring the whole thing down without getting a speck of dust on my boots. Tomorrow the family was coming over for dinner. Jasmine and her husband Garrett. The whole happy clan. I would smile, I would cook, and I would start setting the charges. The first explosion was going to be silent, but it would shatter their world. I spent the entire afternoon in the kitchen standing over the heavy cast iron pot that belonged to my grandmother. I stirred the roux slowly and rhythmically until it turned the color of dark chocolate and the smell of toasted flour and fat filled the entire house. This was my signature seafood gumbo loaded with shrimp and crab and spicy andouille sausage. It was a dish that took patience and love and time, things that my family seemed to have ran out of years ago. Odessa was in the living room pretending to straighten up magazines, but I knew she was just waiting. She did not come in to taste the broth or ask if I needed help chopping the okra. She just floated around like a ghost in the house we had shared for decades. The silence between us was thick enough to cut with a knife, but I kept stirring. I focused on the rhythm of the spoon against the pot. Clink, scrape, clink. It was the only thing keeping me grounded. The doorbell rang at exactly 6 o'clock. My daughter Jasmine and her husband Garrett walked in, bringing a gust of humid air and expensive cologne with them. Jasmine gave me a quick peck on the cheek, but her eyes were darting around the room as if she was appraising the furniture. Garrett shook my hand with that firm grip he learned in business school, the kind that is meant to show dominance rather than respect. He was wearing a polo shirt that cost more than my weekly grocery bill, and his teeth were so white they looked fake. "Hey there, Cyrus," he said, clapping me on the shoulder. "Smells like you have been busy." He did not call me Dad or Mr. Blackwood, just Cyrus. It was a small disrespect, but I added it to the pile. We sat down at the dining table. I ladled the gumbo into bowls, steam rising up between us. I had made cornbread too crisp on the edges and soft in the middle, just the way Jasmine used to like it when she was a little girl. But she barely looked at it. She was too busy looking at her phone, typing away under the table. Garrett took one spoonful, made a face like it was too spicy, and reached for his water. He did not say thank you. He did not say it was good. He just pushed the bowl away slightly and leaned his elbows on the table. So Cyrus Garrett started, his voice booming in the quiet room. "I have been looking at the market trends for this neighborhood. You are sitting on a serious asset here. Real estate in this zip code is up 20% year over year. It is a seller's market, my friend." I took a slow bite of my gumbo. I chewed thoroughly before answering. "Is that so?" I said, keeping my voice level. "I have not paid much mind to the market. This is just my home." Garrett laughed, a short barking sound. "That is the problem, Cyrus. You are thinking emotionally, not financially. You have to look at the opportunity cost. This house is dead equity. It is just sitting here gathering dust when it could be working for you." He used his hands when he talked, chopping the air to emphasize his points. He looked at me with a mixture of pity and impatience, like he was explaining calculus to a toddler. "You see, Cyrus, it is all about liquidity. You are asset rich, but cash poor. You need to leverage this property to maximize your golden years." I watched him carefully. I knew exactly what liquidity meant. I knew what leverage meant. I had managed payrolls for crews of 50 men. I had negotiated contracts with suppliers who tried to bleed me dry. I had built this house with profits I made from smart investments in land back when nobody wanted this land. But Garrett did not see that. He saw an old black man with calloused hands and gray hair. He saw someone who was lucky to have a house at all. He saw a target. "What is leverage again?" I asked, blinking slowly. "Is that like a loan?" Garrett sighed loudly and exchanged a look with Odessa. "Sort of, Cyrus," he said, speaking slower now. "It means using the value of the house to get cash. Look, you and Odessa do not need all this space. 4 bedrooms, a big yard. It is too much maintenance. It is a drain on your resources. If you sell now, you can downsize to a condo. Something modern, something maintenance-free. And you can invest the difference. I can help you with that. I know some funds that are performing well above the S&P. Invest the difference." I almost laughed out loud. He meant I could hand the money over to him so he could gamble it away on crypto or pay off his bookie. I looked at Odessa. She was nodding along, picking at her shrimp. "Garrett is right, Cyrus," she said. Her voice was smooth, like oil. "We are getting older. My knees cannot take these stairs much longer. A condo would be so much easier. And we could travel. We could finally see the world." She wanted to see the world all right. She wanted to see it with Deacon Miller on my dime. I looked at Jasmine, hoping for some defense, hoping my daughter would say that this was the house she grew up in, the house her father built. But she just looked up from her phone and shrugged. "Mom is right, Dad," she said. "This place is old. The roof probably needs work. The plumbing is ancient. It is embarrassing, honestly. All our friends' parents live in gated communities or nice apartments in the city. You guys are stuck here in the past. Embarrassing." The word hung in the air. My life's work, the home I built to keep them safe and warm. It was embarrassing to her. I felt a sharp pain in my chest, but I pushed it down. I needed them to think I was weak. I needed them to think I was folding. I put my spoon down and rubbed my forehead as if I was confused. I tried to fix that leaky faucet last week, I muttered. But I forget where I put the wrench. I spent an hour looking for it. I think I left it in the fridge. The reaction was immediate. Garrett's eyes widened and a small smile played on his lips. Jasmine stopped texting and looked at me with a sudden intense interest. Odessa let out a dramatic sigh and reached over to pat my hand. "Oh, Cyrus," she said, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. "You have been forgetting a lot of things lately. Just yesterday you left the front door unlocked." I did not leave the door unlocked. She did, but I nodded, staring blankly at the tablecloth. "I suppose I did," I said softly. "My mind is not what it used to be. I get confused with all these numbers you are talking about, Garrett. Equity, cash flow. It makes my head spin." Garrett leaned forward, his eyes gleaming with greed. He looked like a wolf that just spotted a limping deer. "That is exactly why you need us, Cyrus," he said. "You should not be burdening yourself with these complex financial decisions. It is too much stress for someone your age. You need to let the younger generation handle the heavy lifting. We can take care of everything. We can set up a trust. We can manage the sale. You just have to sign a few papers and then you can relax. You can just sit back and enjoy your retirement." Jasmine nodded enthusiastically. "Yes, Dad," she said. "Garrett knows what he is doing. He is in finance. He can make sure your money lasts. You do not want to end up broke because you forgot to pay a bill or made a bad decision. We are just looking out for you." I looked from one face to the other, Garrett with his predatory grin, Jasmine with her selfish impatience, Odessa with her deceitful eyes. They were a pack of scavengers circling a dying animal. They did not see a father or a husband. They saw a payday. They saw a signature on a deed. They saw freedom from their own failures paid for by my hard work. I let my mouth hang open slightly and slumped my shoulders. "Maybe you are right," I said, my voice trembling just a little. "I do feel tired. I feel so tired all the time. And these bills, I just toss them in the drawer sometimes because I cannot read the small print." Garrett practically vibrated with excitement. He looked at Odessa and winked. I saw it. It was quick, but I saw it. It was a look of victory, a look that said, "We got him." "Do not worry about the bills," Cyrus Garrett said, reaching for the wine bottle and pouring himself a generous glass. "I will come over tomorrow and we can go through everything. We will get it all sorted out. We will get this house listed by next week. The market is hot. We have to strike while the iron is hot." I nodded slowly. "Next week," I repeated. "That sounds fast. But if you think it is best—" "It is best," Mom Odessa chimed in. "It is best for everyone." They finished their dinner in high spirits. Garrett even ate the rest of his gumbo, complimenting the spice level now that he thought he had won. Jasmine talked about a vacation she wanted to take to Cabo. Odessa talked about new luggage she needed. They talked over me and around me as if I was already gone, as if I was just a piece of furniture they were planning to sell. I sat there and ate my cornbread. It tasted like ash in my mouth, but inside my mind was sharp. My mind was a steel trap. They thought I was losing my grip. They thought I was a senile old man who put wrenches in the refrigerator. They had no idea. I was not forgetting anything. I was remembering everything, every insult, every lie, every greedy glance. I watched them toast with my wine. I watched them smile at their bright future, a future funded by my destruction. They thought they were taking the reins, but they were just grabbing onto a rope that was attached to an anchor, and I was about to kick it off the boat. When they finally left, Garrett clapped me on the back again, harder this time. "Get some rest, Cyrus," he said. "You look like you need it. Big day tomorrow. We are going to get you taken care of." I closed the door behind them and locked it. I stood in the hallway listening to the silence of the house. My house. The house they called embarrassing. The house they wanted to turn into cash flow. I walked back into the dining room. The bowls were empty. The wine bottle was empty. The table was a mess of crumbs and stains. I started clearing the dishes. I washed them by hand in the sink, watching the soapy water turn gray. Odessa had gone straight to the bedroom, claiming she had a headache, probably texting Deacon Miller the good news. I dried my hands on a towel. I looked at my reflection in the dark window above the sink. An old black man with gray hair and tired eyes stared back. But behind those eyes a fire was burning. They wanted to play the game of who is smarter. They wanted to play the game of who is in control. They thought their fancy degrees and their young minds gave them the advantage, but they forgot where they came from. They forgot that I survived Jim Crow. I survived recessions. I survived competitors who tried to burn my business to the ground. I survived a world that told me I was nothing, and I would survive them. I turned off the kitchen light. Tomorrow, Garrett was coming over to go through my papers. He was coming to take control. I smiled in the darkness. Let him come. I had a few papers of my own for him to see, and I had a surprise waiting for him that no amount of leverage could fix. I drove my truck to the old industrial district where the brick buildings still smelled of coal and hard labor. This was where the real work used to happen before the tech companies and the coffee shops moved in. I parked in front of a building that had seen better days but still stood strong, just like the man inside. The sign on the frosted glass door said Elias Thorne, Private Investigations. It did not say attorney at law, even though he was the best lawyer in the state. Elias preferred the shadows. I walked in and the bell above the door jingled a sound that took me back 30 years to when he helped me with a union dispute that could have buried my business. Elias was sitting behind a desk that looked like it was carved from a single redwood tree. He was 75 years old, but his eyes were as clear and sharp as broken glass. He did not smile when he saw me. He did not offer empty platitudes. He just stood up and extended a hand that felt like gripping a bundle of steel wire. "Cyrus," he said. "It has been too long." I shook his hand. "It has, Elias. I wish I was here for a social call." He nodded slowly and gestured to the leather chair opposite him. The leather was cracked and worn comfortable like an old boot. I sat down and looked at him. We were two old lions with gray manes and scars that told stories nobody else would understand. We built this city, Elias and I. I built the structures, and he built the legal frameworks that kept the wolves at bay. Now I needed him to help me kill the wolves inside my own house. "I have what you asked for, Cyrus," he said, placing a thick black folder on the desk. "And I am going to tell you right now, you are not going to like it." I looked at the folder. It sat there like a loaded gun. "Open it, Elias," I said. "I have seen concrete crack and steel bend. I can handle paper." He flipped it open. The first page was a picture of my son-in-law Garrett leaving a building in the bad part of town. He looked sweaty and terrified. "That is a bookie joint," Cyrus, Elias said. "Your financial whiz kid is not investing in the stock market. He is gambling on offshore sports sites and losing. Badly." He turned the page. Spreadsheets, bank transfers, crypto wallets. It was a mess of red ink. "He got caught up in a cryptocurrency scam last year," Elias explained. "He thought he was smarter than the system. He leveraged everything he had. He lost it all. And then he borrowed from people who do not send late notices. They send men with baseball bats. He owes $200,000, Cyrus, and the interest is compounding daily. That is why he is pushing for the house sale. He is desperate. If he does not pay up by the end of the month, they are going to break his legs." I felt a cold anger settling in my gut. Garrett, the man who lectured me about leverage and liquidity, was drowning in his own stupidity. But the next revelation was worse. Elias pulled out a separate stack of papers paper-clipped together. "This is Odessa," he said quietly. I braced myself. I thought I knew about the affair. I thought I knew about Deacon Miller. But I did not know the cost. Literally. Elias laid out bank statements from my joint account, the one I rarely checked because I trusted my wife. For 2 years, there were monthly transfers of $2,000 labeled Church Charity Fund. But the routing number does not go to the First Baptist Church Cyrus. It goes to a private LLC registered to Deacon Miller. I stared at the numbers. 2 years, $48,000 minimum, plus the dinners, plus the hotels. My wife was not just sleeping with him. She was sponsoring him. She was his sugar mama funded by my sweat. Elias showed me more. Receipts for custom suits for the deacon. A lease on a luxury sedan in his name paid for by a cashier's check from Odessa. She was building him a life while she was tearing mine down. She looked at me every day, ate my food, slept in my bed, and all the while she was funneling my life savings to a hypocrite who preached about sin on Sunday mornings. It was not just betrayal, it was theft. It was a long con played out over coffee and Sunday dinners. I closed the folder. The room was silent. I could hear the ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner. It sounded like a countdown. Elias was watching me closely, waiting for me to break, waiting for the tears of a heartbroken old man. But my eyes were dry. The moisture had evaporated, leaving only a hard, dry rage. It was the kind of rage that burns cold and clean. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the gray street. They think I am stupid, Elias, I said, my voice low and steady. They think I am a relic, a wallet with a pulse. Garrett thinks he can talk circles around me because he went to college. Odessa thinks she can smile and lie because I have loved her for 50 years. They do not see me. They see an obstacle. Elias tapped the folder. We can take this to the police, Cyrus. We can file for fraud. We can get restraining orders. I shook my head. No police. Not yet. Police is too easy. Police is paperwork and lawyers and plea deals. I want them to feel it. I want them to think they have won. I want them to stand on the mountaintop and look down at the kingdom they think they have conquered, and then I want to kick the mountain out from under their feet. I turned back to my old friend. I need you to set up a trust, Elias. A blind trust. I am going to start moving assets. And I need you to hire a forensic accountant to trace every penny Garrett owes. I want the names of the loan sharks. I want to know exactly who is holding his leash. Elias smiled, a slow, dangerous smile. You are going to trap them, he said. I picked up the folder. I felt the weight of it, the weight of their sins. No, Elias, I said. I am not going to trap them. I am going to let them trap themselves. I am going to give them exactly what they want. I walked to the door, my grip on the folder tight enough to turn my knuckles white. They want a confused old man. They want a helpless victim. Fine. They want to play the senile old man game. I will play that role until they are left with nothing. The war for my mind began on a Tuesday morning with a set of keys. I have placed my truck keys in the same ceramic bowl by the front door for 40 years. It is a muscle memory etched into my bones. But that morning the bowl was empty. I searched the pockets of my work jacket. I checked the kitchen counter. I checked the floor mats of the truck. Nothing. Odessa stood in the hallway watching me with her arms crossed and a look of deep concern plastered on her face like a layer of cheap makeup. What are you looking for, Cyrus? She asked, her voice soft and pitying. My keys, I grumbled, moving the mail aside on the table. I put them right here. Odessa shook her head slowly. Oh, Cyrus, honey, you were in the kitchen last night getting a glass of milk. Did you leave them in there? I walked into the kitchen. I opened the refrigerator. There, sitting on the middle shelf next to the carton of milk, were my keys, cold and misplaced. I stared at them. I knew I had not put them there. I knew it. But Odessa was right behind me. See, there they are, she said, patting my shoulder. You are getting so forgetful lately, Cyrus. It is worrying me. It was not just the keys. It was a campaign of small, calculated cruelties designed to chip away at my foundation. 2 days later, I went to take my blood pressure medication. I have taken one pill every morning at 8 o'clock since I turned 60. I opened the organizer on the bathroom counter. The slot for Tuesday was empty. The slot for Wednesday was empty. Thursday was full. I frowned. I knew I had not taken them. I am a man of routine. Routine is what kept my building standing and my business profitable. Garrett walked past the bathroom door, pausing just long enough to shake his head. Did you forget your pills again, Cyrus? He asked, loud enough for Jasmine to hear in the living room. You know, skipping doses can make you confused. It causes dizziness. Maybe that is why you have been acting so strange. They were gaslighting me. They were moving the pieces of my reality around when I was not looking, hoping I would doubt my own sanity. They wanted me to believe I was slipping. They wanted me to believe the cracks in the walls were my fault. But they forgot that I built the walls. I knew the difference between a structural failure and sabotage. I did not argue with them. I did not scream that they were liars. I played the part. I rubbed my temples and looked at the floor. I must be slipping, I muttered, letting my voice tremble just enough to sell it. I do not know what is happening to me. I saw Garrett smirk in the mirror's reflection. He thought he was breaking me. He had no idea he was just hardening the concrete. The climax of their little theater production came on Sunday afternoon. It was a beautiful day, the kind where the Georgia sun feels like a warm blanket. We were hosting a barbecue in the backyard. Neighbors were there, including Mrs. Higgins from next door, who had known me since I laid the foundation for her porch. Garrett had insisted on helping with the grill. Why do you not relax, Cyrus? He said, taking the tongs from my hand. You have been looking tired. Let me handle the fire. I sat down in a lawn chair watching him. He moved around the grill with the arrogance of a man who has never had to build a fire to stay warm. I saw him fiddling with the propane tank. I saw his hand linger on the regulator valve, turning it way past the safety mark. He stepped back and looked at me. Cyrus, he called out. I think the flame is dying. Can you check it? I walked over. I knew what was coming. I could smell the gas pooling heavy and dangerous in the air. I reached for the lid. I knew exactly what he had done. He had flooded the chamber. As soon as I lifted that lid, the oxygen would hit the gas and it would flare. A younger man might have called him out. A man who was not planning a war might have turned the gas off and scolded him. But I needed them to think they were winning. I needed witnesses to my decline. I lifted the lid. Whoosh! A ball of orange fire erupted from the grill, singing the hair on my arms and sending a wave of heat into my face. I stumbled back, dropping the tongs. It was not a dangerous explosion, but it was loud and it was scary. Garrett jumped back, screaming like he was the victim. Jesus Christ, Cyrus, he yelled, his voice cracking. You almost blew us up. What is wrong with you? Did you leave the gas on? The music stopped. The conversation died. Every eye in the backyard was on me. Mrs. Higgins covered her mouth with her hand, her eyes wide with fear and pity. Jasmine ran over, grabbing Garrett's arm as if checking him for shrapnel. Dad, she cried, you have to be more careful. You could have hurt someone. I stood there, my heart hammering, not from fear but from the sheer audacity of their performance. Garrett was looking at the neighbors, shaking his head, his face a mask of long-suffering patience. I am so sorry, everyone, he announced, his voice projecting like he was in a boardroom. Cyrus has been having some trouble with appliances lately. We are handling it. I looked at Mrs. Higgins. She looked away, unable to meet my eyes. That was the knife twisting in my gut, the loss of respect, the pity. They looked at me and saw a hazard, a senile old man who should not be trusted with matches. I lowered my head. I let my shoulders slump. I am sorry, I whispered, my voice raspy. I thought it was off. I got confused. Garrett put a hand on my shoulder. It felt heavy and cold. It is okay, Cyrus, he said loud enough for the back row to hear. Go wash your face. We will finish up here. Sit down before you hurt yourself. I walked away from the grill. I walked past my neighbors, my friends, my family. I walked into the house with my head down, playing the role of the defeated patriarch. But inside my chest a furnace was burning hotter than that grill ever could. I went into the downstairs bathroom and locked the door. I turned on the faucet, letting the water run cold and loud. I splashed water on my face, washing away the soot and the shame. I looked at myself in the mirror. My eyes were clear, my hands were steady. I was not confused, I was focused. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small black earbud. I placed it in my ear and pressed a button on my phone. 3 days ago, while they were sleeping, I had installed a high-fidelity listening device under the kitchen island counter. It was military-grade, something Elias Thorne had procured for me. The audio crackled to life. I could hear the sounds of the party outside, the murmur of voices, the clinking of glasses. And then, clear as a bell, I heard them. They must have come into the kitchen to get more ice. Did you see his face? Garrett's voice was wet with laughter. He looked like a scared puppy. I turned that valve all the way up. He did not even check it. He is totally gone, Jasmine replied. Her voice did not sound sad. It sounded relieved. Mrs. Higgins was looking at him like he belongs in a home. That is perfect witness testimony right there. We have enough, Garrett said. The keys, the pills, the fire. The lawyer said we just need a pattern of behavior. We have a pattern. The trap is set. The old man is walking right into it. When Jasmine asked. Next week, Garrett said. I have the appointment scheduled with Dr. Evans on Thursday. He is on the payroll. We take him in for a checkup. Evans asks him a few questions, gets him flustered, declares him incompetent. We file the emergency guardianship papers on Friday. By the weekend, we will have power of attorney. We can list the house on Monday. I stood there in the bathroom, water dripping from my chin, staring at my reflection. Thursday. I had 4 days. 4 days before they tried to strip me of my rights. 4 days before they tried to turn me into a ghost in my own life. Garrett laughed again, a sound that made my skin crawl. It is almost too easy, he said. He trusts us. He thinks we are taking care of him. Stupid old man. I took the earbud out and put it back in my pocket. I dried my face with a towel. I was not a stupid old man. I was a man who had just been given the blueprints to the enemy's attack. They had a timeline. Now I had one too. They were going to try to ambush me on Thursday, but they did not know that I had already dug the trenches. I unlocked the bathroom door and stepped back out into the hallway. I was ready to go back outside. I was ready to eat their burnt burgers and listen to their fake concerns. Let them think the trap was sprung. Let them think the lion was asleep. Thursday was coming, and I would be ready. The Tuesday morning sun filtered through the curtains as I sat in my living room preparing for what I knew would be the final test. I had called Jasmine and asked her to come over alone. I told her I was feeling sentimental and wanted to look through some old photo albums. I told her I missed our time together, just father and daughter. It was a trap, of course, but it was a trap baited with love. I wanted to see if she would take the bait or if she would snap the trap shut on her own hand. I spent hours setting the scene. I dusted off the old leather-bound albums, the ones filled with pictures of her first steps, her high school graduation, her wedding day. I went into the kitchen and made a pot of hot cocoa using the same recipe I used when she was a little girl, melted chocolate, whole milk, and a dash of cinnamon. I placed a plate of her favorite butter cookies on the coffee table. The house smelled like nostalgia. It smelled like a time when things were simple and my little girl looked at me like I hung the moon. I sat in my armchair and waited. My hands were steady, but my heart was heavy. I looked at a photo from 20 years ago, me and Jasmine fishing at the lake. She was smiling, holding up a tiny bluegill, and I was beaming with pride. I wondered where that girl had gone. I wondered if she was still in there somewhere, buried under layers of greed and entitlement. When I heard her car pull into the driveway, I took a deep breath. This was it. Jasmine walked in looking impatient. She checked her watch before she even said hello. She was wearing expensive workout clothes and holding her car keys tight in her hand. "Hey, Dad," she said, giving me a quick, distracted hug. "What is this about? I have a spin class in an hour." I poured the cocoa into 2 mugs. "Just sit with me for a minute, Jasmine," I said softly. "Humor an old man." She sighed loudly, but she sat down on the edge of the sofa. She looked at the cookies and wrinkled her nose. "I am doing keto, Dad," she said. "I cannot eat those." I opened the photo album. "Look," I said, pointing to a picture. "Remember this day, the day you won the spelling bee. You were so happy." She glanced at the photo without interest. "That was 1,000,000 years ago, Dad. Why are we doing this?" I looked at her. I looked deep into her eyes, searching for any sign of softness, any sign of the daughter I raised. I saw nothing but irritation and calculation. I nodded slowly. "I have been doing a lot of thinking lately, Jasmine," I said. "About the future, about legacy." Her ears perked up at that word. She leaned forward slightly. "What about the future?" she asked. I took a sip of my cocoa. It was warm, but it did not warm the coldness inside me. "I have decided to rewrite my will," I said calmly. She froze. Her eyes widened. "Really?" she said, her voice tight. "Well, that makes sense. Garrett said you should probably update it. What are you thinking?" I leaned back in my chair. "I am thinking about what really matters," I said. "I came into this world with nothing, Jasmine. I fought for every dime I have, and I have realized that easy money makes weak people. I do not want to make you weak. So I have decided to donate 80% of my estate to the United Negro College Fund. I want to help kids who are hungry, kids who want to build something but just need a chance, like I did." The silence in the room was absolute. It was the silence of a bomb counting down. Jasmine stared at me, her mouth slightly open. Her face went pale, then a splotchy red. 80%, she whispered. "You are joking. You have to be joking." I shook my head. "I am deadly serious," I said. "I will leave you and Garrett enough to pay off your mortgage, maybe a little nest egg for the grandkids. But the rest, the bulk of it, it goes to charity. It is the right thing to do." She stood up slowly. Her hands were shaking. "No," she said. "No, I do not think that is the right thing to do. I think that is insane. You cannot do that, Dad. It is not fair." "Why not?" I asked, keeping my voice level. "It is my money. I earned it." "It is our money," she screamed. The sound was ugly and raw, tearing through the cozy atmosphere I had built. "How can you be so selfish? You are going to give millions to strangers while your own family struggles. You care more about looking like a hero to the world than you care about your own blood." "Struggles?" I asked. "Jasmine, you live in a 5-bedroom house, you drive a luxury SUV, you go on vacations 3 times a year. That is not struggling. You do not understand," she yelled, pacing the room like a caged animal. "You have no idea what it costs to live our life. We have plans, we have needs, and you are just going to throw it away because you want to play saint. You do not care about us. You never did. You are a selfish, bitter old man." I watched her unravel. This was not just greed. This was panic. She was terrified. And terror makes people say true things. Terror makes the mask slip. "You are my blood, Jasmine," I said. "That is why I am doing this. I want you to stand on your own 2 feet. I want you to be strong." "I do not want to stand on my own feet," she shrieked, her face twisted and ugly. "I want what is mine." "Garrett has been waiting for this. We have been waiting. You cannot just pull the rug out from under us now." And then she said it. The words that sealed her fate. The words that cut the last thread connecting us. "Garrett needs that money to live, Dad. He needs it now." She clamped her hand over her mouth as soon as the words left her lips. Her eyes went wide with horror. She realized she had said too much. She realized she had just admitted everything. I sat there staring at her. Garrett needs it to live. Not to buy a boat, not to invest, to live. That confirmed everything Elias Thorne had told me. The loan sharks, the danger. My daughter knew. She knew her husband was in deep with dangerous men. And instead of coming to me for help, instead of telling me the truth, she was waiting for me to die so she could pay his ransom with my grave money. She was willing to let them put me in a home, willing to let them drive me crazy just to save her husband from his own mistakes. I closed the photo album. The sound was final, like a gavel hitting a bench. The nostalgia was gone. The hope was gone. "Get out," I said. She blinked, tears streaming down her face now. "Dad, please." "I did not mean—" "Get out!" I roared, standing up. My voice shook the walls of the house I built. "I am not dead yet, Jasmine, and I am not an ATM machine. I am your father, or I used to be. Now get out of my house before I call the police." She grabbed her purse and ran. She did not look back. She did not apologize. She just ran out the door. I walked to the window and watched her. She fumbled with her keys, dropping them on the pavement before snatching them up. She got into her car, but she did not drive away immediately. She pulled out her phone. I could see her shouting into it. She was calling Garrett. She was telling him the plan had failed. She was telling him the bank was closed. She was telling him that the old man knew. I watched her drive away, leaving black tire marks on the driveway I had paved for her when she got her first car. My heart was broken, shattered into a million pieces, but my resolve was harder than ever. I went back to the table and picked up the mug of cold cocoa. I poured it down the sink. The test was over. She had failed. And now the war was truly on. I drove to First National Bank with the morning sun hitting the windshield, but I felt cold inside. This was the bank where I opened my first business account 40 years ago, when other banks would not even look at a black man with dirt under his fingernails. I walked through the glass doors and the smell of air conditioning and old money hit me. I did not stand in line. I walked straight to the glass office at the back. Robert Henderson, the branch manager, saw me coming. We had known each other since we were boys playing stickball in the street. He stood up immediately, his face serious. He did not smile. He knew why I was there. He ushered me in and closed the blinds. "Cyrus," he said, his voice low, "I am glad you came. We had an incident yesterday." I sat down in the leather chair. I knew there had been an incident because Elias Thorne had told me, but I needed to see it. "Show me Robert," I said. "I want to see him." Robert turned his computer monitor toward me. He clicked a file labeled security footage. The video was grainy but clear enough. I saw my son-in-law Garrett walk into the bank. He was wearing a suit that looked expensive but fit him poorly, like he was trying to be someone he was not. He walked up to the teller window with a swagger that made my stomach turn. I watched him slide a piece of paper across the counter. "That is a power of attorney form," Robert explained. "He claimed you were incapacitated. He said you had a stroke and he needed to liquidate the accounts to pay for your medical bills." I watched the teller on the screen. She was a smart girl named Sarah. She looked at the paper, then she looked at Garrett. She shook her head. I saw Garrett's face change. The charm vanished. He slammed his hand on the counter. I could not hear the audio, but I could see his mouth moving fast and angry. He was shouting. He was pointing a finger in Sarah's face. Other customers were turning around. A security guard started walking toward him. Garrett snatched the paper back and stormed out, looking like a kicked dog. "He tried to forge your signature, Cyrus," Robert said, pointing to a photocopy of the document on his desk. "It was a good attempt. He got the loop on the C right, but he missed the pressure point on the B. You always press hard on the downstroke. He writes like a man with soft hands." I looked at the forgery. It was an insult. He thought he could mimic 50 years of character with a ballpoint pen. He thought he could walk into my bank and take what was mine just because he was younger and whiter and thought he was smarter. He was wrong. I looked at Robert. He was waiting for me to tell him what to do. He was ready to call the police. He was ready to lock the accounts. But I had a different plan. I did not want to lock the money away where nobody could touch it. I wanted to move it. I wanted to put it somewhere Garrett could see but never reach. I wanted him to know that the well had run dry. "Let us get to work, Robert," I said. "I want to make some transfers, and I want them done today, right now." Robert nodded and pulled his keyboard closer. "Where are we moving it, Cyrus?" I leaned forward. "We are moving it all," I said. "Every dime. I want to liquidate the savings. I want to cash out the CDs. I want to empty the investment portfolio." Robert's eyes went wide. "That is a lot of movement, Cyrus. It is going to trigger flags. The IRS will want to know." "Let them know," I said. "I pay my taxes. This is my money. I want you to set up 3 irrevocable trusts. One for the United Negro College Fund, one for a scholarship program for trade schools, and one blind trust that only I can access through Elias Thorne." We spent the next 2 hours moving mountains. I watched the numbers on the screen disappear from the joint account I shared with Odessa. 200,000, 500,000, 1.2 million. It was like watching my life's blood drain out of a wound, but instead of dying, I felt stronger. I was severing the limb to save the body. I was cutting off the fuel supply to the enemy. Robert typed furiously, his fingers flying across the keys. He printed out documents for me to sign. I signed my name, Cyrus Blackwood, over and over again. My hand did not shake. My signature was firm and heavy, just the way it had always been. I was signing away my past to protect my future. I was signing away the inheritance my ungrateful children thought they deserved. When we were almost done, Robert looked at the screen. "There is about $500 left in the checking account, Cyrus. Do you want to close it out completely?" I thought about it. If I closed it, they would know immediately. The card would be declined. But if I left it open, they would have hope. Hope is a cruel thing. Hope keeps you walking into the trap. "Leave it," I said. "Leave exactly $500. That should be enough for them to buy a nice dinner to celebrate their victory before they realize they have lost the war." Robert smiled, a grim, tight smile. "You are a hard man, Cyrus." I stood up and buttoned my jacket. "I had to be hard, Robert. The world is soft and it tries to eat you alive if you let it." I shook his hand. "Thank you, my friend. If anyone asks, if Garrett comes back, if Odessa calls, you tell them nothing. You tell them privacy laws prevent you from discussing the account. You let them sweat." I walked out of the bank feeling lighter than I had in days. The money was gone. It was safe. It was out of their reach. I had just impoverished myself on paper, but I felt like the richest man in Atlanta. I got back in my truck and drove toward the house. The sun was high in the sky now, burning away the morning mist. I felt focused. I felt dangerous. I had secured the perimeter. Now it was time to deal with the invaders inside the walls. I did not pull into my driveway. I parked down the street under the shade of a large magnolia tree. I wanted to see what was happening before I walked into the line of fire. I turned off the engine and watched. There were 3 cars in my driveway: Odessa's sedan, Garrett's flashy BMW, and a third car I did not recognize. It was a beat-up sedan with a dent in the rear bumper and a lawyer's parking sticker on the windshield. It looked like the kind of car driven by a man who chases ambulances. I got out of the truck and walked quietly through the neighbor's yard, keeping to the hedges. I knew the blind spots of my own property. I crept up to the side of the house near the dining room window. The window was open just a crack to let in the breeze. I could hear voices, low, urgent voices. I peered through the sheer curtains. They were all there. Odessa was sitting at the head of the table, wringing her hands. Garrett was pacing back and forth, his face red and sweaty. Jasmine was sitting next to her mother, looking pale. And there was a man I had never seen before. He was wearing a cheap suit that was too shiny and his tie was loose. He had a briefcase open on the table and papers were spread out everywhere. "This is a problem," Garrett was saying, his voice tight with panic. "The bank manager shut me down. He knows. I think he called the old man." "He cannot know," Odessa said, her voice trembling. "Cyrus came home last night and went straight to bed. He did not say a word. He thinks everything is fine. We cannot take the risk," the lawyer said. His voice was oily and smooth like a used car salesman. "If he moves that money before we get the order, we are out of luck. We need to file for emergency guardianship immediately. We need to prove he is a danger to himself and others. We need a judge to sign off on it by tomorrow morning." "How do we prove he is dangerous?" Jasmine asked. She sounded scared, but she did not sound like she wanted to stop. She sounded like she wanted to know how to get away with it. "We have the incident with the grill," Garrett said. "We have the missing keys. We have the neighbor's testimony. Mrs. Higgins thinks he is losing it. That is enough for an emergency hold. Once we have the temporary order, we can freeze his assets. We can take control of the accounts. We can put him in a facility for evaluation. By the time he gets out, we will have sold the house and moved the funds." A facility. They were talking about locking me up. They were talking about taking a man who had built churches and schools and putting him in a room with barred windows just so they could pay off a bookie. I felt a wave of nausea, but I swallowed it down. I watched the lawyer pick up a pen. "I have the papers drafted," he said. "Petition for emergency guardianship due to incapacity. I just need you to sign here, Mrs. Blackwood. As his wife, you have the primary standing. You say he is confused. You say he is aggressive. You say you are afraid for your safety." Odessa hesitated. She looked at the paper. She looked at Garrett. She looked at the expensive ring on her finger, the one I bought her for our 40th anniversary. Then she picked up the pen. "I am afraid," she said softly. "I am afraid he is going to ruin everything we have built." She signed it. I watched her write her name. Odessa Blackwood, the name I gave her. She signed my life away with a ballpoint pen. I backed away from the window. I had seen enough. I had heard enough. They were not just greedy. They were evil. They were willing to erase me to save themselves. I walked back to my truck, my footsteps silent on the grass. I got in and started the engine. I did not go home. I had one more stop to make. I had to get ready for Sunday. If they wanted to talk about aggressive, if they wanted to talk about danger, I would show them exactly what a dangerous man looked like. I was going to bring the whole temple down on their heads, and I was going to do it in the house of the Lord. Sunday morning arrived with the heavy humidity that clings to your skin like a wet wool blanket. I put on my best navy blue suit, the one I bought 5 years ago for a funeral. It felt appropriate because today I was going to a place of worship to bury the last of my faith in humanity. I drove Odessa to the First Baptist Church in silence. She was wearing a wide-brimmed white hat and clutching her Bible, the very picture of a devout Christian woman. She hummed a gospel tune under her breath, looking out the window at the passing houses. She looked peaceful. It made my stomach turn. She was going to the house of the Lord to smile at the man she was sinning with, and she did not have an ounce of shame in her body. We walked into the sanctuary, and the air was thick with the smell of floor wax and expensive perfume. The choir was already swaying in the loft, their voices rising in a wave of glory. I walked down the aisle, my cane tapping against the hardwood floor I had refinished myself 10 years ago. I shook hands. I nodded at neighbors. I played the part of Brother Cyrus, the pillar of the community. We took our usual seats in the third pew on the left, directly across from the pulpit. Deacon Miller was already up there, pacing the stage like a lion in a cage. He was wearing a cream-colored suit that I knew cost $2,000 because I had seen the receipt in Elias Thorne's file. He was sweating, shining under the lights, holding a microphone like it was a weapon. He looked powerful. He looked charismatic. He looked like a snake in a silk suit. The sermon began, and of all the topics in the good book he could have chosen, he chose integrity. Brothers and sisters, he boomed his voice, shaking the rafters. The Lord sees what is in your heart. You can hide your sins from your neighbors. You can hide them from your spouse, but you cannot hide them from the Almighty. The congregation shouted, "Amen." Odessa shouted, "Amen," right next to me. I watched them. I watched the way Miller's eyes scanned the crowd until they landed on my wife. It was quick, a flicker of a glance, but it was there. He looked at her with a heat that had nothing to do with the Holy Spirit, and she looked back. She tilted her head slightly, a small secret smile playing on her lips. It was a communication so subtle that only a man looking for cracks in the foundation would notice, but I saw it. I saw the intimacy. I saw the shared secret. I sat there feeling the wood of the pew hard against my back. I felt like I was suffocating. Here was this man using my money to buy his suit, sleeping with my wife, and standing in the pulpit lecturing me about honesty. He talked about the sin of greed. He talked about the sin of deception. Every word was a lie. Every gesture was a performance. I looked around at the faces of the congregation. Good people, honest people. People who worked hard and tithed 10% of their meager earnings. They were nodding along, drinking in his poison, thinking it was water. The rage inside me was a physical thing. It was a pressure in my chest, expanding like steam in a boiler. I wanted to stand up and shout. I wanted to tell them exactly where their tithes were going. I wanted to tell them that their deacon was a thief and an adulterer. But I stayed seated. I kept my face blank. I clutched my cane until my knuckles turned gray. This was not the time for an explosion. This was the time for excavation. I needed to dig a hole deep enough to bury him in, and I needed him to jump into it willingly. When the service ended, the sanctuary dissolved into the chaotic joy of fellowship. People hugging children running between legs, the choir coming down from the loft. I told Odessa I needed to speak to the deacon about a donation. Her eyes lit up. A donation, she asked. That is wonderful, Cyrus. He will be so pleased. She probably thought I was finally opening the wallet again. She probably thought she could skim a little off the top. I told her to go start the car and turn on the air conditioning because I did not want her to overheat. She kissed my cheek and sashayed out the door, hips swaying. I waited until the line of people shaking Miller's hand thinned out. I approached him slowly, letting my shoulders slump a little more than usual, leaning heavily on my cane. I wanted to look frail. I wanted to look like a man whose mind was softening like wet drywall, Brother Cyrus Miller said, flashing that blinding white smile. Good to see you. How is your spirit today? My spirit is troubled. Deacon, I said, keeping my voice low and raspy, I need a word. In private. He looked at me, assessing me. He saw the expensive watch on my wrist. He saw the desperation I was projecting. He nodded and guided me toward the small office behind the choir loft. It was quiet back there, away from the noise of the crowd. He closed the door and sat behind a large mahogany desk. What is on your mind, brother? He asked, steepling his fingers. I sat down and sighed, a long, rattling breath. I am getting old. Deacon, I said, my memory is going. My family thinks I am losing it. And the truth is, I think they might be right. I get confused. I forget things. Miller leaned forward, his eyes narrowing slightly. I am sorry to hear that, Cyrus. Age comes for us all. But that is not what worries me, I continued. It is the money. I have made a lot of money in my life, Deacon, and I have not always been a righteous man. I have cut corners. I have been hard on people, and now that I am facing the end, I am scared. I am scared for my soul. Miller's face changed. The concern vanished, replaced by a sharp, predatory interest. The mention of money always got his attention. You want to make peace with the Lord, he said softly. Yes, I said. I want to clear my conscience. I have a substantial amount of cash. Money that the government does not know about. Money from jobs back in the 80s. I want to give it to the church, but I cannot do it through the official channels. My son-in-law, Garrett, he watches my accounts like a hawk. If he sees a check, he will stop it. He wants it all for himself. I paused, letting the words hang in the air. I watched Miller do the math in his head. Cash, off the books. No paper trail. No Garrett. How much are we talking about, Cyrus? He asked, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. $50,000, I lied. In $100 bills. Miller inhaled sharply. He licked his lips. That is a very generous gift, Cyrus. The Lord would certainly look favorably on such a sacrifice. But I need you to handle it personally, I said. I do not want a receipt. I do not want a plaque with my name on it. I just want to hand it to you and know that it is going to God's work. Can you do that for me, Deacon? Can you take this burden off my soul? Miller stood up and walked around the desk. He put a hand on my shoulder. It felt heavy and hot. Brother Cyrus, he said, his voice thick with fake emotion. I would be honored to help you find redemption. We can keep this between us and the Lord. It will be our secret. I looked up at him, playing the part of the grateful penitent. Thank you, Deacon. You do not know what this means to me. When can you bring it? He asked. The greed was leaking out of him now. He was not even trying to hide it. I thought about it. I scratched my chin with a trembling hand. My 50th wedding anniversary party is coming up, I said. Next Saturday. Everyone will be there. It will be chaotic. Garrett will be distracted playing the host. I can bring the cash in a gift bag. I will hand it to you during the reception. Nobody will suspect a thing. Miller smiled. It was a wide, genuine smile. The smile of a man who just won the lottery. That sounds perfect, Cyrus. Absolutely perfect. I will be there. I will make sure that money finds its way to the right place. I stood up, leaning on my cane. I felt a wave of revulsion so strong I almost gagged, but I forced myself to shake his hand. God bless you, Deacon, I said. God bless you too, Cyrus, he replied. You are doing the right thing. I walked out of the office and down the hallway. As soon as I was out of his sight, I straightened my back. I reached into my jacket pocket and pressed the stop button on the digital recorder I had sewn into the lining. I had him. I had him accepting illegal cash. I had him agreeing to bypass the church's financial controls. I had him conspiring with a man he thought was senile to hide money from his family. I walked out into the bright Sunday sunlight. Odessa was waiting in the car, the engine running. I got in and she looked at me expectantly. "Did you talk to him?" she asked. "I did," I said, fastening my seatbelt. He was very understanding. Odessa smiled, relaxing back into her seat. "That is good, Cyrus. That is very good." She had no idea. She thought I was securing her future with her lover. She thought I was funding their retirement. She did not know that I had just handed Deacon Miller the shovel he would use to dig his own grave. And next Saturday, in front of God and everyone, I was going to push him into it. Thursday morning arrived with a sky the color of a bruised plum. I sat in my leather armchair in the living room wearing my old cardigan with the missing button. I chose it specifically because it made me look small. It made me look like a man who had stopped caring about the details. I stared at the wall clock, watching the second hand sweep past the 12, tick, tick, tick. It was the rhythm of a trap snapping shut. At 10 o'clock sharp, the front door opened. Garrett walked in without knocking. He never knocked anymore. He treated my house like a waiting room for his inheritance. Behind him walked a man who looked like he had slept in his car. He was wearing a white coat that was a size too small and carrying a battered leather satchel. Dad Garrett said, his voice booming with fake cheerfulness. "I brought a friend to see you. This is Dr. Evans. He is just going to ask you a few questions. A routine checkup." I looked at Dr. Evans. I knew him, not personally, but from the file Elias Thorne had given me. His name was not really Evans. It was Mitchell, and he had lost his medical license 3 years ago for writing prescription painkillers for cash. He was a gambler just like Garrett. I could smell the stale cigarette smoke on him from across the room. He had the shaky hands of a man who needed a drink. "Dr. Evans," I said, letting my voice quaver, "are you the foot doctor? My bunions are killing me today." Garrett sighed loudly and rolled his eyes. "No, Dad, he is a specialist. A brain doctor. He just wants to make sure you are thinking clearly." Evans stepped forward and forced a smile that looked like a grimace. "Hello, Mr. Blackwood. No need to worry. We are just going to have a little chat. Why do you not sit back and relax?" I sank deeper into the chair, letting my mouth hang open slightly. I gripped the armrests as if I was afraid of falling off the earth. I was ready for my performance. I was ready to give them exactly what they paid for. The air in the room was thick with tension, and the cheap cologne Garrett wore to cover up the smell of his desperation. Evans pulled a dining chair over and sat directly in front of me. He pulled a clipboard out of his satchel. He did not even have a pen. He had to pad his pockets until Garrett handed him a gold-plated one, probably stolen from my desk. "All right, Mr. Blackwood," Evans started clicking the pen. "Let us start with something easy. Can you tell me what year it is?" I squinted at him. I looked at the window. I looked at my hands. The year, I repeated slowly. Well, it must be the year of the flood. Or was that the year the crops failed? I remember Odessa wearing a blue dress. "Is it 1999? Garrett snorted from the corner of the room. "See," he hissed. "He has no clue." Evans wrote something down on the clipboard. "Okay, Mr. Blackwood, can you tell me who the President of the United States is?" I smiled, a vacant, goofy smile. "The President," I said. "That is easy. It is that nice man on the television, the one who sells the car insurance, or is it the man who reads the weather? I like him. He has a nice tie." Evans looked at Garrett and shook his head. "This is advanced," he muttered. "Disorientation. Cognitive decline." "Let us try some math," Evans said, turning back to me. "Can you count backwards from 100 by sevens?" I frowned. 100, I said. "That is a big number. I used to have $100 once. I bought a bicycle, a red one. I rode it all the way to the river. Did you know the river is rising? We should probably check the levees." I was talking nonsense. I was mixing memories with gibberish. I was weaving a tapestry of senility that was so thick they could not see the man hiding behind it. I watched Garrett's face. He was not sad. He was not worried. He was delighted. Every wrong answer was a dollar sign in his eyes. He was practically vibrating with excitement. Evans put the clipboard down on his knees. Mr. Blackwood, do you know who this man is pointing at, Garrett? I looked at my son-in-law. I looked at the man who was trying to bury me. I looked at the man who forged my signature and stole from my accounts. That is the delivery boy, I said confidently. He brings the pizza. But he always forgets the pepperoni. You should tip him anyway. He looks like he needs the money. Garrett laughed out loud. It was a cruel, ugly sound. The delivery boy, he crowed. That is Rich. He does not even know his own family. Write it down, Evans. Write it all down. Total incapacity. Danger to himself and others. Evans scribbled furiously. I think we have seen enough, he said, standing up. The diagnosis is clear. Severe dementia. He is unable to manage his own affairs. He needs immediate guardianship. Garrett walked over and clapped Evans on the back. Thank you, doctor. You have no idea how hard this has been on the family. We just want to make sure he is safe. Safe, Evans repeated, putting the pen in his pocket. Of course. I will sign the affidavit right now. You can file it with the court in the morning. I watched them. 2 crooks sealing a deal over my living body. Evans signed the paper with a flourish. That piece of paper was their golden ticket. It was the key to the kingdom. Or so they thought. Garrett took the paper and looked at it like it was a love letter. This is it, he whispered. We are finally in charge. He looked at me one last time. There was no pity in his eyes, only triumph. Do not worry, Cyrus, he said, his voice dripping with condescension. We are going to take good care of you. We are going to find you a nice room with a view of a brick wall. They turned and walked out of the house. I heard them laughing on the porch. I heard Garrett say something about buying a new boat. I heard the car doors slam and the engine roar to life. They were driving away to celebrate. They were driving away to drink to their success. I waited until the sound of the engine faded into the distance. The house was quiet again. The heavy, suffocating presence of their greed was gone, leaving only the clean silence of my own home. I sat up straight in the chair. I buttoned the top button of my cardigan. The vacant look vanished from my eyes, replaced by the cold steel of a man who has just successfully baited a trap for a pack of wolves. I stood up and walked over to the bookshelf in the corner. It was filled with old encyclopedias and framed photos of a family that no longer existed. On the second shelf sat a teddy bear. It was a scruffy brown bear with a red ribbon around its neck. It was a toy I had bought for my granddaughter years ago, but she had said it was ugly and left it here. I picked up the bear. It felt heavy in my hand. I looked into its black plastic eyes. Hello, Mr. Bear, I said softly. Did you see all that? I turned the bear over and opened the Velcro seam on its back. Nestled inside the stuffing was a small black box, a high-definition camera with a wide-angle lens. The red light was still blinking. Recording. I stopped the recording and pulled out the memory card. I held it up to the light. It was a tiny piece of plastic, smaller than a fingernail, but it contained enough explosive power to level a skyscraper. I had them. I had Garrett bringing a fake doctor into my home. I had the fake doctor conducting a sham exam. I had them conspiring to commit fraud. I had Garrett coaching the doctor. I had Evans signing a legal document based on lies. This was not just evidence for a civil suit. This was evidence for a criminal indictment. This was the nail in the coffin. I walked to my desk and inserted the card into my computer. I watched the video. The picture was crisp. The audio was crystal clear. I watched myself playing the fool. I watched Garrett laughing at me. I saved the file. I made 3 copies, one for Elias Thorne, one for the district attorney, and one for the big screen at the party. I leaned back in my chair and took a deep breath. They wanted to declare me incompetent. They wanted to take away my voice. Well, they were about to find out that I had a very loud voice and I was done whispering. The party was in 2 days, the golden anniversary. 50 years of marriage. It was supposed to be a celebration of love. Instead, it was going to be a celebration of justice. I looked at the calendar on the wall. Saturday was circled in red ink. I am coming for you, Garrett, I whispered to the empty room. I am coming for you, Odessa, and I am bringing the thunder. The night before, the party was silent, but it was not peaceful. It was the heavy, charged silence of the air before a tornado touches down. I sat in my study, the only room in the house where I still felt like myself. The curtains were drawn, shutting out the world. On the desk in front of me sat a crystal tumbler filled with amber liquid. It was a single malt scotch aged 25 years. I had been saving it for this anniversary. I had planned to share it with Odessa to toast to half a century of love and partnership. Now I was drinking it alone. It burned, going down a clean, sharp heat that matched the fire in my belly. I looked around the room. The shelves were lined with architectural books, blueprints and awards. Framed photos covered the walls. Me and Odessa on our wedding day, young and hopeful. Me holding Jasmine when she was born, my hands looking enormous next to her tiny body. Family vacations at the beach, graduation days, Christmas mornings, a lifetime of memories, and every single one of them was now tainted. Every smile was a lie. Every hug was a deception. I reached for the small digital recorder on the desk. I had listened to these files a dozen times, but I needed to hear them again. I needed to steel myself. I needed to remember why I was doing this. I pressed play. The voice of my wife filled the room, tinny and distorted, but unmistakable. She was talking to Deacon Miller. "I can barely stand to touch him anymore," she said. Her voice was filled with disgust. "He smells like old dust and sawdust. His skin is so dry. It is like sleeping next to a corpse. I just close my eyes and think of you, baby." I took a sip of scotch. Sawdust. That sawdust built the roof over her head. That sawdust put food on her table and diamonds on her fingers. She called me a corpse. Well, she was about to find out that this corpse still had teeth. I skipped to the next track. It was Garrett talking to his bookie on the phone. I recorded it from the bug in the kitchen. "Do not worry about the money," he was saying, his voice arrogant and loud. "The old man is a pushover. He is a stupid old N-word who got lucky with a few contracts back in the day. He does not even know how to use a computer. I am going to bleed him dry, and he is going to thank me for it." The racial slur hung in the air, ugly and hateful. It was not the first time I had been called that. I grew up in the South in the 50s. I had been called worse by better men. But hearing it from the man I welcomed into my home, the man who married my daughter, the man who ate my food, it cut deeper than any knife. He did not just think I was old. He thought I was inferior. He thought my black skin made me stupid. He thought my lack of a college degree made me easy prey. I clenched my fist until my nails dug into my palm. Stupid. Lucky. I worked 16-hour days in the blistering heat. I fought for every contract. I dealt with banks that would not lend to me and suppliers who marked up their prices. I built an empire with my bare hands while he was playing video games and failing algebra. And he thought he was smarter than me. I played the last track. It was Jasmine. My little girl. She was talking to Garrett. "Why does he have to live so long?" she whined. "It is selfish, really. He is just taking up space. If he died now, we would get everything. The house, the insurance. We could finally live the way we are supposed to." Taking up space. That is what I was to her. Not a father. Not a provider. Just an obstruction. A fleshy obstacle standing between her and a pile of money. I turned off the recorder. The silence rushed back in louder than before. I finished the scotch in one swallow. The burn was good. It reminded me I was alive. I looked at the stack of papers Elias Thorne had messengered over an hour ago. They were sitting in a neat pile next to the empty glass. The top document was titled Petition for Dissolution of Marriage. Divorce papers, after 50 years. It felt like amputation, but a gangrenous limb has to go or it kills the whole body. Underneath that was a criminal complaint: fraud, embezzlement, elder abuse, conspiracy. The list of charges was long and heavy. It detailed every stolen dollar, every forged signature, every lie. And at the bottom was the new will and testament, the one that left everything to charity, the one that left my family with nothing but their own rot. I picked up my favorite fountain pen. It was heavy gold-plated, a gift from a client 20 years ago. I uncapped it. The ink was black, permanent. I signed the divorce papers first. Cyrus Blackwood. The signature was steady. There was no hesitation. The man who loved Odessa died the moment he saw her in that red dress. The man signing these papers was a survivor. Then I signed the criminal complaint. I was sending my son-in-law to prison. I was sending my wife's lover to prison. I was destroying my daughter's life. But they had built the prison themselves brick by brick. I was just locking the door. Finally, I signed the will. I looked at the names of the charities: the United Negro College Fund, the Trade School Scholarship, Boys and Girls Clubs. This money was going to build futures. It was going to help kids who knew the value of a dollar, Kids who would not call their fathers stupid. Kids who would not call their husbands corpses. It was done. The ink dried, glistening in the lamplight. I put the cap back on the pen and set it down. I stood up and walked over to the mantelpiece. In the center sat a large framed photograph. It was taken on our 25th anniversary. Odessa and I were dancing. She was laughing, her head thrown back. I was looking at her with so much love, it hurt to see it now. I picked up the photo. The glass was cool against my fingertips. I looked at it for a long time. I remembered that night. I remembered thinking I was the luckiest man in the world. I remembered thinking we would grow old together, sitting on the porch, watching the sun go down. I was a fool. I turned the photo over and opened the back. I took the picture out. I held it over the trash can next to the desk. For a second, my hand trembled. 50 years is a long time. It is a whole life. But then I heard Garrett's voice in my head. Stupid old N-word. I let the photo drop. It fluttered down into the darkness of the bin, landing on top of crumpled papers and old receipts. I placed the empty frame face down on the desk. I walked to the window and pulled back the curtain. The moon was high and full, casting a silver light over the lawn. Tomorrow was the party, the golden anniversary, 200 guests, champagne, cake, speeches. They thought it was going to be their coronation. They thought I was going to hand over the keys to the kingdom and fade away into the twilight. I smiled. A cold, hard smile. Tomorrow was not a coronation. It was an execution. And I was the hangman. I turned off the lamp, plunging the room into darkness. I walked out of the study and closed the door. I went upstairs to the guest room. I locked the door. I lay down on the bed, fully dressed. I did not sleep. I stared at the ceiling, waiting for the sun to rise, waiting for the storm to break, waiting for the end of the world. The grand ballroom of the Royal Hotel was a spectacle of excess that would have made a Roman emperor blush. Crystal chandeliers the size of small cars hung from the ceiling, casting a prism of light over 200 guests. The tables were draped in silk linens that shimmered under the lights, and the centerpieces were towering arrangements of white orchids and calla lilies imported from South America. I stood near the entrance in my tuxedo, feeling the stiff collar against my neck like a noose. I looked around the room and saw my life savings being eaten and drunk by strangers. There was a champagne fountain flowing with vintage Dom Perignon. There was a seafood station piled high with lobster tails and king crab legs. There was a jazz quartet playing in the corner, their music smooth and expensive. I knew exactly how much this cost. I knew because my phone had been vibrating in my pocket all day with fraud alerts from my credit card company. Garrett and Odessa had spared no expense. Why would they? It was not their money. They were spending the inheritance they thought they had already secured. They were throwing a party to celebrate their own cleverness. I watched Odessa working the room. She was wearing a gold sequined gown that hugged her body tightly. She looked radiant. She looked like the queen of the ball. She was laughing with the mayor's wife, holding a flute of champagne with her pinky extended. Every few minutes her eyes would dart to the corner of the room where Deacon Miller was holding court. The deacon was wearing a tuxedo that matched mine, custom-tailored and sharp. He was surrounded by the church elders, nodding solemnly as he spoke, probably telling them about the burdens of leadership, while he ate my shrimp and drank my wine. He looked at Odessa with a possessive gleam in his eye. It made my stomach turn. They were so bold, they were so sure of themselves. They thought the old man in the corner was too blind to see the glances and too stupid to understand the game. Jasmine was there too, wearing a dress that cost more than her car. She was showing off her diamond earrings to a group of her high school friends. I heard her laugh, a shrill sound that grated on my nerves. "My father is so generous," she was saying. "He just wants us to be happy." Generous. That was the word of the night. Everyone came up to me, shaking my hand, patting my back, telling me how lucky I was to have such a devoted family. "You must be so proud, Cyrus," they said. 50 years is a long time. You have built a beautiful life." I nodded and smiled, a tight grimace that passed for gratitude. I did not trust myself to speak. If I opened my mouth, I might scream. I might tell them that the beautiful life they saw was a facade built over a sinkhole. Garrett appeared at my side, his face flushed with alcohol and adrenaline. He smelled of scotch and expensive cologne. "It is time, Cyrus," he said, gripping my elbow. "The speeches are starting. Everyone is waiting for you." He guided me toward the stage, his grip firm and controlling. He was playing the part of the dutiful son-in-law perfectly. He whispered to people as we passed, "Excuse us. Coming through, make way for the man of the hour." He treated me like a fragile piece of cargo, something valuable but heavy that needed to be moved carefully. We walked up the stairs to the stage. The spotlight hit us, blinding me for a second. The room went quiet. 200 faces turned toward us. I saw the anticipation in their eyes. They were expecting a heartwarming moment. They were expecting tears and hugs. Garrett took the microphone. He stood tall, puffing out his chest. He looked out at the crowd with a smile that showed too many teeth. "Good evening, everyone," he boomed, his voice echoing through the hall. "Thank you all for coming to celebrate this momentous occasion. 50 years, half a century. It is an achievement that most of us can only dream of." He paused for applause. The room clapped politely. Garrett turned to look at me, his expression softening into a mask of adoration. "I have known Cyrus Blackwood for 10 years, he continued, "and in that time I have learned what it means to be a man. I have learned what it means to build something from nothing. Cyrus is a legend in this town. He built the schools your children go to. He built the churches where you pray. He built the foundations of this community with his bare hands." He reached out and put a hand on my shoulder. I could feel the heat of his palm through my jacket. It felt like a brand. "But even legends get tired," Garrett said, his voice dropping to a somber, reverent tone. "Even giants need to rest. Cyrus has spent his whole life taking care of others. He has carried the weight of the world on his shoulders, and now as he enters his golden years, it is time for us to take care of him. It is time for him to lay down his burden." Odessa walked up the stairs, then dabbing at her dry eyes with a lace handkerchief. She stood on my other side, linking her arm through mine. She leaned her head on my shoulder, the picture of a devoted wife. "Cyrus has always been a provider," Garrett said, his voice rising again. "He has always put his family first. And tonight, he wants to make one final grand gesture. He wants to ensure that his legacy lives on. He wants to ensure that his children and his grandchildren are secure." I watched the crowd. They were leaning forward, captivated. They were eating it up. Garrett reached into his inside jacket pocket. He pulled out a thick envelope. He opened it slowly, theatrically. He pulled out a sheaf of papers bound in a blue legal folder. "Ladies and gentlemen," Garrett announced, holding the papers up like a trophy. "Tonight we are not just celebrating an anniversary, we are celebrating a transition. Cyrus has decided to gift his entire estate, including his company, his properties, and his assets to his family. He is transferring the stewardship of the Blackwood legacy to me and his daughter Jasmine, so that he can finally enjoy the retirement he so richly deserves." The crowd erupted. They stood up and cheered. They thought it was beautiful. They thought it was noble. They did not know they were cheering for a robbery. They did not know they were applauding a coup. Garrett turned to me, his eyes shining with triumph. He held out the papers. He held out a gold fountain pen. "Here it is, Dad," he said, loud enough for the microphone to pick up. "The transfer of deed, the power of attorney, everything we talked about. Just sign here and we will take it from here. You will never have to worry about a bill again." He thrust the pen toward me. The crowd went silent, waiting for the historic moment. I looked at the papers. I saw the words quitclaim deed. I saw the words irrevocable power of attorney. He was trying to trap me in public. He was trying to use the social pressure of 200 people to force my hand. He thought I would be too embarrassed to refuse. He thought I was too weak to fight back. I looked at Odessa. She was smiling at me, squeezing my arm. "Do it, honey," she whispered. "Do it for us." I looked at Jasmine in the front row. She was clasping her hands together, her eyes locked on the pen. I looked at Deacon Miller. He was raising a glass to me, a smirk on his face. I reached out and took the pen. Garrett's smile widened. He thought he had won. He thought the game was over. But then I took the microphone from the stand. My hand was steady. The tremor I had been faking for weeks was gone. My back straightened. I grew 3 inches taller in that moment. The fog of senility vanished from my eyes, replaced by the cold, hard stare of a man who has poured concrete while others slept. I did not look at the papers. I looked out at the audience. I looked at the faces of the people who respected me. "Thank you, Garrett," I said, my voice deep and clear, booming through the speakers without a hint of a waver. "That is a very generous speech. And this is a very interesting document." Garrett's smile faltered. He sensed the change. He reached for the mic, but I stepped away. "You talk about legacy," I continued. "You talk about truth. You talk about family. Well, since we are all here gathered in the sight of God and our neighbors, I think it is time we had a little truth-telling session. I dropped the pen. It clattered loudly on the wooden stage. I do not want to sign these papers, Garrett, I said, and I do not think anyone here would want me to if they knew what I know. Garrett lunged forward, whispering frantically, Dad, what are you doing? You are confused. Sit down. I pushed him back. I am not confused, I roared. I have never been more lucid in my life. I turned to the projectionist booth at the back of the room. I had paid the technician $500 cash an hour ago. Hit it, I commanded. The lights in the ballroom dimmed. The giant screen behind the stage flickered to life. The music stopped. The room went deadly silent. Garrett looked at the screen. Odessa looked at the screen. Deacon Miller looked at the screen. And the show began. You said you wanted a gift, Garrett, I said, my voice echoing off the vaulted ceiling of the ballroom. You wanted a grand gesture. You wanted a legacy. Well, I have prepared something special, something that captures the true spirit of this family, something that shows exactly what has been going on behind the curtains of the Blackwood estate while I was out pouring concrete. I raised my hand and signaled to the booth at the back of the room. The technician did not hesitate. The crystal chandeliers dimmed until the room was plunged into a heavy, expectant darkness. The only light came from the exit signs and the glowing screens of a few cell phones. The 200 guests fell silent. They turned their chairs toward the massive projection screen that dominated the wall behind the stage. They were expecting a montage of old photos. They were expecting black and white pictures of me and Odessa on our wedding day. They were expecting pictures of baby Jasmine. They were expecting a tearjerker set to sentimental piano music. Instead, the screen flickered to life with the harsh digital clarity of a high-definition security feed. The timestamp in the corner of the video read Tuesday, 10:14 p.m. The location was unmistakably the lobby of the Regal Hotel. The camera angle was high looking down, but the faces were as clear as if they were standing right in front of us. A collective gasp sucked the air out of the room as Odessa walked into the frame. She was not wearing her Sunday best. She was wearing that red dress. The dress that hugged curves a grandmother was not supposed to show off. The dress that screamed betrayal. And she was not alone. Walking right beside her, his arm draped casually and possessively over her shoulder, was Deacon Miller. The audio kicked in. It was crisp. It was loud. It boomed through the speakers with a fidelity that made it sound like they were standing on stage with us. I cannot believe he never uses these points, Miller said on the screen. He was laughing, a deep rumbling sound that usually accompanied a scripture reading, but now sounded like pure grease. He is a Diamond member. Do you know how much this room would cost cash? Odessa laughed. It was a girlish giggle that made my skin crawl. Cyrus is a fool, she said. Her voice was sharp and clear. He thinks saving money makes him a martyr. He is just a boring old mule. He would not know what to do with a luxury suite if it bit him. All he knows is dirt and sweat. The audience in the ballroom was frozen. It was the kind of silence you hear after a car crash before the screaming starts. On the screen, Miller pulled Odessa closer. He kissed her neck right there in the hotel lobby. He whispered something in her ear and she swatted his arm playfully. Stop it, Deacon, she said, giggling again. Wait until we get upstairs. We have all afternoon. Cyrus thinks I am watching the grandkids. He won't be home until 6. Miller smirked at the camera unknowingly. The Lord provides, he said. And so does your husband. Let us go drink his champagne. The video cut to a different angle. This one was inside the elevator. It was a color camera and the lighting was bright. The doors closed, enclosing them in a steel box. As soon as they were alone, the pretense of propriety vanished completely. Miller pushed Odessa against the wall of the elevator. His hands were roaming over her. She was kissing him back with a hunger that I had not seen in 30 years. It was raw. It was graphic. It was undeniable. Look at this, Miller said, pulling away slightly to adjust his tie in the mirror. Using his points to sleep with his wife. That is almost poetic. Do you think he suspects anything? Odessa shook her head, smoothing down the red dress. He does not suspect a thing, she said, sneering. He is getting senile. He forgets where he puts his keys. He is too busy trying to be a good man to realize he is being played. He is pathetic, really. I just need him to sign over the accounts and then I can put him in a home where he belongs. The elevator chimed. The doors opened. They walked out hand in hand, laughing at my expense. The screen went black for a second. Then it looped back to the beginning. The red dress, the arm over the shoulder, the laughter. I stood on the stage watching the video play again. I watched myself being called a mule. I watched myself being called pathetic. I watched the woman I had built a life with planning my incarceration while she cheated on me with my spiritual leader. I did not feel pain anymore. I felt a cold, hard satisfaction. The truth was out. The infection had been lanced. The reaction in the ballroom was not immediate. It took a few seconds for the reality of what they were seeing to penetrate the shock. But when it hit with the force of a physical blow. A woman in the front row screamed. It was a short, sharp sound of pure scandal. Then the murmurs started rising like a tidal wave. "Oh my God, is that the deacon? Is that Sister Odessa?" I looked down at the front table. Deacon Miller was standing up. His face was the color of ash. His mouth was opening and closing like a fish on a dock, but no sound was coming out. His hand, which had been holding a glass of expensive red wine, went slack. The glass fell. It hit the edge of the table and shattered, spraying dark crimson liquid all over his cream-colored suit. It looked like a gunshot wound. He stared down at the stain spreading across his chest, his eyes wide with terror. He looked up at the screen, then at me, then at the church elders sitting at the table next to him. The elders were not looking at me. They were looking at Miller. Their faces were masks of absolute stone-cold judgment. Sister Margaret, the head of the choir, slowly stood up and turned her back on him. It was a gesture of excommunication more powerful than any decree. Odessa was still sitting. She was frozen in her chair, her hands gripping the tablecloth so hard her knuckles were white. She was staring at the screen, unable to look away from her own sin. Her face was a rictus of horror. The radiant queen of the ball had vanished, replaced by a terrified old woman who had just realized she was naked in front of the world. She looked at me, her eyes pleading, her lips forming my name, but no sound came out. She knew. In that moment she knew that the life she had known was over. The reputation she had carefully cultivated for 40 years was incinerated in 60 seconds of high-definition video. Garrett was the only one moving. He was scrambling. He looked at the screen, then at the projection booth, then at me. He realized he had lost control of the narrative. He realized the sympathetic, senile old man story just got blown out of the water by the adulterous wife story. He rushed toward me, his hands reaching for the microphone. "Dad, stop this," he hissed, his face slick with sweat. "Turn it off. You are humiliating us. This is a private matter." I stepped back, keeping the microphone out of his reach. "Private," I boomed, my voice amplified over the gasps of the crowd. "You made it public, Garrett. You brought these people here. You put me on this stage. You wanted a show. Well, you got one." I looked out at the crowd. I looked at the friends we had known for decades. I looked at the business associates. I looked at the neighbors. They were all staring at Odessa and Miller with a mixture of fascination and disgust. Phones were out. People were recording. This was not just a local scandal. This was going to be viral by midnight. "But I am not done," I said into the microphone. My voice cut through the noise, silencing the room again. "Infidelity is a sin of the flesh. It hurts the heart. But what my family has been doing to me goes deeper than that. It goes to the bone." Garrett froze. He looked at me with wild eyes. He knew what was coming next. He knew that the affair was just the appetizer. The main course was about to be served. I signaled the booth again. "Next clip," I commanded. The video on the screen changed. The hotel lobby vanished. The scene shifted. It was grainy and black and white this time. It was the night vision camera from the kitchen. The angle was low, hidden under the counter. Garrett and Jasmine were standing by the island. It was the night of the barbecue. The night I almost burned my eyebrows off. The audio was a little fuzzy at first, but then it cleared up. "He is totally gone," Jasmine's voice rang out. Mrs. Higgins was looking at him like he belongs in a home. "That is perfect witness testimony right there. We have enough." Garrett's voice replied, arrogant and smug. "The keys, the pills, the fire." The lawyer said, "We just need a pattern of behavior. We have a pattern. The trap is set. The old man is walking right into it." The crowd gasped again, louder this time. This was not just sex. This was conspiracy. This was a daughter and a son-in-law plotting to destroy a father. Garrett turned to Jasmine in the video. "Next week," he said. "I have the appointment scheduled with Dr. Evans on Thursday. He is on the payroll. We take him in for a checkup. Evans asks him a few questions, gets him flustered, declares him incompetent. We file the emergency guardianship papers on Friday. By the weekend, we will have power of attorney. We can list the house on Monday." Garrett screamed. He actually screamed. It was a high, thin sound of pure panic. He lunged for the technician's booth, running down the stairs of the stage. "Turn it off," he yelled. "It is a lie. It is deep fake. Turn it off." Two large men in black suits stepped out from the shadows near the booth. They were private security hired by Elias Thorne. They blocked Garrett's path. He bounced off them like a rubber ball. He looked around frantically, realizing he was trapped. On the screen, the video continued. "It is almost too easy," Garrett said on the recording, laughing that ugly laugh. "He trusts us. He thinks we are taking care of him. Stupid old N-word." The slur hit the room like a physical slap. The gasp was audible. The shock was palpable. The black guests in the room stood up, their faces hard with anger. The white guests looked down in shame. Garrett had just exposed his soul, and it was rotten to the core. I stood on the stage watching him. He was panting, staring at the screen where his own voice had just condemned him. He looked at Jasmine. She was sitting in the front row, tears streaming down her face, her makeup running in black streaks. She was shaking her head, mouthing, "No, no, no," over and over again. I raised the microphone one last time. "You wanted my money, Garrett?" I said, my voice calm and deadly. "You wanted my house. You wanted my dignity. You thought because I was old and because I was black that I was stupid. You thought you could just take what I built." I reached into my pocket and pulled out a single piece of paper. It was the bank statement from this morning. "Well, I have some news for you," I said. The room was so quiet you could hear the ice melting in the champagne buckets. "There is no money," I said. Garrett's head snapped up. His eyes bulged. "I emptied the accounts this morning," I continued. "Every dime. $3 million. It is gone. I donated it. I gave it to people who will use it to build something, not destroy it." I crumpled the paper and threw it at his feet. "And the house," I said, pointing to the screen where the video of their conspiracy was frozen. "The house is sold. I signed the deed over to a land trust yesterday. You are standing on property that does not belong to me anymore, and it certainly does not belong to you." Garrett let out a sound that was half sob, half roar. He looked at me with pure hatred. "You crazy old man," he screamed. "You cannot do that. That is my money. I earned it. I put up with you for 10 years. You earned nothing." I roared back, my voice finally breaking with the rage I had held in for weeks. "You are a parasite," and I just called the exterminator. As if on cue, the double doors at the back of the ballroom burst open. The music of the jazz quartet had long since died. The only sound now was the heavy tread of boots on the marble floor. Police. Nobody move. 6 officers in uniform marched into the room. They were not smiling. They were not there for the party. They were led by a detective in a cheap suit who looked like he meant business. Garrett froze. He looked at the police. He looked at me. He looked at the exit. For a second I thought he was going to run, but there was nowhere to go. The walls he had tried to build around me had fallen on him. This was the end of the party, and the beginning of justice. The projection screen flickered one more time, shifting from the high-definition color of the hotel lobby to the grainy black and white of my kitchen security camera. The timestamp was from 3 nights ago. The room was dark, illuminated only by the light over the stove and the glow of the open refrigerator. Garrett was standing there holding a bottle of my imported beer. He looked comfortable. He looked like he owned the place. Jasmine was sitting at the island counter counting a stack of cash that I knew came from my emergency drawer. The audio hissed for a second before their voices cut through the ballroom like a knife. Garrett took a swig of beer and wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. "I talked to the facility today," he said. "They have a bed opening up in the memory care wing next Tuesday. It is perfect. It is the cheapest room they have. No windows, shared bathroom. It smells like urine and bleach, but it is secure. Once we drop him off, we toss the key." Jasmine did not look up from the money. She just kept counting. 100, 200, 300. "Is it secure?" she asked. "I do not want him wandering out and finding a phone. He needs to disappear, Garrett. I cannot deal with his lectures anymore. I cannot deal with his eyes judging me." Garrett laughed. It was a cold sound that echoed off the ballroom walls. "Do not worry, babe," he said. "He is not going anywhere. Once Dr. Evans signs that paper, he is a prisoner. We will medicate him until he does not know his own name. He will just be a vegetable, waiting to rot." The audience in the ballroom was dead silent. The horror was palpable. But then Garrett said something that made the air leave the room completely. He leaned in close to Jasmine, his face twisted in a sneer. "I cannot wait to get that old man out of here," he said. "I am sick of living in this museum. I am sick of smelling his old man smell." and I am sick of listening to a stupid old N-word tell me how to spend money he does not even know how to enjoy. The racial slur hung in the air like toxic smoke. It was not just a word, it was a weapon. It was the distillation of all the hatred and resentment he had hidden behind his smiles and handshakes for 10 years. He did not just want my money, he hated me. He hated the color of my skin. He hated that a black man had succeeded where he had failed. He hated that he had to beg me for scraps. In the ballroom, the reaction was visceral. People gasped. A chair scraped loudly against the floor as someone stood up in anger. The black guests, who were my friends and business partners, looked at Garrett with a fury that could burn down a city. Even the white guests looked at him with revulsion. He had stripped himself bare. There was no charm left, no sophistication, just a small, hateful bigot standing in a tuxedo he could not afford. Garrett stood at the bottom of the stage steps, frozen. He looked at the screen where his own face was twisted in hate. He looked at the crowd. He looked at me. His face was pale, the color of old milk. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He was drowning in his own bile. Jasmine was sobbing in the front row, her hands covering her face. But it was too late for tears. The world had seen her counting my money while her husband planned my demise. The world had heard her agree to lock me in a windowless room. I signaled the booth to cut the feed. The screen went black, plunging the room back into the dim light of the chandeliers. I stepped forward to the edge of the stage. I looked down at Garrett. He looked small now, pathetic. I reached into the inside pocket of my tuxedo jacket. I pulled out a single folded piece of paper. It was not a speech. It was a bank statement. I unfolded it slowly, letting the crisp paper crinkle in the silence. "You talked a lot about legacy tonight, Garrett," I said, my voice steady and hard. "You talked about taking care of me. You talked about the Blackwood estate. Well, I think it is time everyone knew exactly what that estate is worth today." I held the paper up to the light. "This is the balance of my primary checking account as of 9 o'clock this morning," I announced. I read the number out loud, $500.00. Garrett blinked. He shook his head as if he had water in his ears. What he croaked. $500, I repeated. "That is what is left. That is your inheritance. That is your payday." I reached into my pocket again and pulled out another document. This one was a wire transfer confirmation. $3.2 million, I said. That was the balance yesterday. This morning I wired every single cent to the United Negro College Fund. I donated it. I gave it to young men and women who will use it to build a future, not steal one. I gave it to people who know the value of hard work. Garrett looked like he had been punched in the gut. He doubled over slightly, clutching his stomach. "No," he wheezed. "You cannot do that. That is my money. I earned it. I put up with you. I waited." "You earned nothing!" I roared, my voice booming without the microphone. "You are a parasite. You lived in my house. You drove my cars. You ate my food. And all the while you were sharpening the knife to stick in my back. Well, the feast is over, Garrett. The table is empty." I pointed a finger at the floor beneath his feet. "And this house," I said, sweeping my arm to encompass the ballroom and the grounds beyond. "The house you wanted to sell. The house you called embarrassing. It is not yours either." I pulled out the final document. It was a deed of sale recorded electronically just hours ago. "I sold the house yesterday," I said. "I sold it to a land trust that builds affordable housing for seniors. The transaction is complete. The title has transferred. You are standing on property that belongs to the Sunshine Housing Corporation. You are trespassing." Garrett straightened up. His eyes were wild. The shock was turning into madness. The reality of his situation was crashing down on him. The debts, the loan sharks, the bookies. Without my money, he was a dead man walking. Without the house, he had no collateral. He had nothing. "You are lying!" he screamed, saliva flying from his lips. "You are a lying old man. You cannot sell the house without my permission. I have power of attorney." I laughed. It was a cold, dark sound. "Your power of attorney is a forgery," I said. "And the bank knows it. The police know it. And now everyone here knows it." Garrett looked around the room frantically. He looked for an exit. He looked for an ally. He found neither. The guests formed a wall of judgment. The exits were blocked by the police officers who had just entered. He was a rat in a trap, and the water was rising. He looked back at me. His eyes locked onto mine. I saw the moment his mind snapped. The moment the desperation overtook his self-preservation. He did not see an old man anymore. He saw the architect of his destruction. He saw the demon who had taken away his future. "I will kill you," he shrieked. He lunged. It happened fast, but to me it looked like slow motion. Garrett leaped up the stairs to the stage. His face was purple with rage. His hands were clawed, reaching for my throat. He wanted to squeeze the life out of me. He wanted to silence the voice that had exposed him. I did not move. I did not flinch. I did not raise my hands to defend myself. I stood there like a statue of judgment. I knew something he did not. Just as his foot hit the top step, a shadow moved from the side of the stage. It was a mountain of a man named Marcus, the head of the private security team Elias Thorne had hired. Marcus moved with a speed that belied his size. He intercepted Garrett in midair. It was like watching a fly hit a windshield. Marcus lowered his shoulder and slammed into Garrett's chest. The air left Garrett's lungs in a wet explosion. He flew backward off the stage, his arms flailing. He hit the dance floor with a sickening thud. He slid across the polished marble, crashing into the base of the champagne fountain. The tower of glasses swayed and then collapsed. Hundreds of crystal flutes shattered raining glass and expensive champagne down on him. He lay there in a puddle of alcohol and broken glass, groaning, clutching his chest. He tried to get up, but Marcus was on him in a second. He pinned Garrett to the floor, his knee in the small of his back. He pulled Garrett's arms behind him, and I heard the zip of plastic restraints tightening. I walked to the edge of the stage and looked down. Garrett was thrashing, his face pressed against the wet floor. He was sobbing now, ugly broken sobs. I looked at him with zero pity. I looked at him the way you look at a termite you have just crushed. "You tried to break me, Garrett," I said, my voice quiet but carrying in the silence. "You tried to break my mind. You tried to break my family, but you forgot one thing. Concrete does not break. It only gets harder." I looked up at the police officers who were now making their way through the crowd. "Officer," I said, pointing at the man on the floor, "I believe this man is trespassing, and I have reason to believe he has committed fraud, forgery, and attempted assault. Please remove him from my sight." The officers hauled Garrett to his feet. He was bleeding from a cut on his forehead. Champagne soaked his tuxedo. He looked at me one last time. His eyes were empty. The arrogance was gone. All that was left was fear. "Why?" he whispered. "Why did you do it this way?" "Because you needed to learn," I said. "You needed to learn that you cannot build a life on a foundation of lies. And now you have the rest of your life to think about it." They dragged him away. I watched him go. I adjusted my cuffs. I looked at the crowd. I looked at Odessa, who was still frozen in her chair, pale as a ghost. "The party is over," I said. "Go home." The heavy double doors of the ballroom swung open and stayed open. The uniformed officers filed in with the precision of a drill team, moving in a blue wave that washed over the extravagance of the party. It was not chaotic in the way a riot is chaotic. It was controlled. It was surgical. It was the heavy hand of the law coming down on a house of cards. Behind the line of officers walked Elias Thorne. He carried a leather briefcase that looked heavier than a tombstone. He did not look at me. He scanned the room, his eyes cold and assessing, ticking off the targets one by one. The 200 guests pressed themselves against the silk-draped walls, giving the officers a wide berth. The air in the room shifted instantly. The smell of expensive perfume and roast beef was replaced by the sharp metallic scent of fear. I stood on the stage, my hands gripping the podium, and watched the scene unfold. It was a terrible thing to see a family destroyed, but it was necessary. It was like watching a controlled demolition. You mourn the building, but you know the rot was too deep to save it. Garrett was hauled up from the floor by 2 officers. His tuxedo was soaked in champagne, and his face was a mask of snot and blood. He looked around wildly, searching for an exit, searching for a lawyer, searching for anyone who would save him. But there was no one. The private security team stepped back and let the police take over. I felt a grim satisfaction in my chest. It was not joy. There is no joy in sending your family to hell. But there was peace. The peace of knowing that the lies were over. The peace of knowing that the wolves had been defanged. The detective in the cheap suit stepped into the center of the room. He pulled a piece of paper from his pocket, and his voice rang out clear and unforgiving. "Garrett Wilson," he announced, reading from the warrant. "You are under arrest for bank fraud, forgery, identity theft, and elder abuse." Garrett let out a sob that sounded like a wounded animal. He tried to speak, he tried to say it was a mistake, but the officer spun him around and slammed him against the edge of the stage. The sound of the handcuffs ratcheting shut echoed through the silent ballroom. Click, click, click. It was the sound of his future closing down. But the detective was not done. He turned his gaze to the head table where Deacon Miller was sitting. The deacon was trembling so hard the silverware on the table was rattling. He tried to stand up, adjusting his suit, trying to summon some of his pulpit authority. "Officer," he stammered, his voice high and thin, "I am a man of God. Surely there has been a mistake. The detective did not even blink. He walked over to the table, his boots loud on the marble floor. "Deacon Miller," he said, "you are under arrest for embezzlement, money laundering, and tax evasion. We have the records of the shell company. We have the transfers. We know about the charity fraud." Miller's knees gave out. He collapsed back into his chair, his face the color of ash. He looked at his flock, the people who had trusted him with their souls and their money. They were staring at him with eyes full of betrayal. The officers pulled him out of the chair. They spun him around and cuffed him right there in front of the choir. And then there was Dr. Evans, or Mitchell. He was trying to slide along the wall toward the kitchen exit, hoping to disappear into the steam and noise of the catering staff. 2 officers blocked his path. "You too, doctor," the detective called out, "practicing medicine without a license and conspiracy to commit fraud." Mitchell squealed when they grabbed him, dropping his fake medical bag on the floor. 3 men, 3 predators, all in chains. They were lined up and marched out the main doors, past the people they had tried to impress, past the life they had tried to steal. That left the women. The police did not approach Odessa or Jasmine. There were no handcuffs for them today. Elias Thorne had told me that the case against them was harder to prove criminally without a direct paper trail of fraud, but their punishment was already happening, and it was far crueler than a jail cell. I watched the room turn on them. The church elders, the business partners, the neighbors, they were all looking at Odessa. They were not looking at her with pity. They were looking at her with revulsion. She sat alone at the head table, surrounded by empty chairs and shattered glass. She reached out a hand toward Sister Margaret, her friend of 30 years, who was standing near the table. Margaret looked at the hand as if it were covered in leprosy. She did not say a word. She gathered her purse, turned her back, and walked out of the ballroom. One by one, the guests followed suit. It was a silent shunning, a social execution. Jasmine was standing near the front row, tears streaming down her face, ruining her expensive makeup. She saw a group of her friends' girls. She had gone to high school with girls she had bragged to about her inheritance. She took a step toward them, pleading with her eyes. They stepped back, forming a solid wall of cold shoulders. They had heard the recordings. They knew she was willing to lock her father in a dark room to keep her lifestyle. They looked at her like she was a monster. Jasmine let out a wail and sank to the floor, burying her face in her hands. She was toxic. She was radioactive. No one wanted to be near the fallout. Odessa looked up at me on the stage. Her eyes were hollow. The arrogance was gone. The red dress, which had seemed so bold and defiant in the hotel video, now looked cheap and tawdry. She looked old. She looked at me, and for the first time she realized that I was the only person who had ever truly loved her. I was the only one who had protected her, and she had thrown me away for a man in handcuffs. I looked at them, stranded on an island of their own making. They were free to go, but they had nowhere to go. They were outcasts in the town I built. The room emptied out slowly until it was just me, the security guards, and the 2 women who used to be my world. They were ghosts now, haunting a life that no longer existed. I straightened my tie and walked down the stairs. I did not look at them. I walked past them toward the exit, leaving them in the ruins of their own greed. The silence in the ballroom was heavy and suffocating, like the air before a thunderstorm. The guests were gone. The police were gone. The waiters were clearing the tables, avoiding eye contact with the 3 of us left in the wreckage. I walked over to the head table where Odessa was still sitting. She looked small. The sequins on her dress did not sparkle anymore. They just looked like cheap plastic. She was staring at the empty chair next to her where Deacon Miller had been sitting before they dragged him away in cuffs. Her hands were shaking so bad the ice in her water glass was clinking against the crystal. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the last envelope. It was thick and heavy. I did not hand it to her. I tossed it onto the table. It slid across the tablecloth, knocking over a salt shaker, and stopped right in front of her hands. She flinched as if I had thrown a brick. She looked at the envelope, then looked up at me. Her eyes were red-rimmed and terrified. "What is this, Cyrus?" she whispered. Her voice was cracked and dry. I looked down at her. I felt nothing. The rage was gone. The hurt was gone. There was just a cold, empty space where my love used to be. "Those are divorce papers, Odessa," I said, my voice flat and hard, "and a restraining order." She let out a sob and reached for my hand, but I stepped back. "Cyrus, please," she begged. "We have been married for 50 years. You cannot just throw that away. It was a mistake. I was weak. He manipulated me. We can fix this. We can go to counseling. I will do anything. I laughed. It was a dry, dusty sound. You were not weak, Odessa. You were cruel. You called me a corpse. You laughed while you spent my money on another man. You signed papers to lock me away in a dark room. That is not a mistake. That is a choice. I pointed at the clock on the wall. It was 11 o'clock. The new owners of the house take possession at 8 in the morning, I said. The locks will be changed. The security codes will be reset. Anything left inside after that belongs to them. Her eyes went wide. But where am I supposed to go? She cried. That is my home. It was your home, I corrected her, until you tried to steal it. Now it is just a building. You have exactly 1 hour to get back there and pack your bags. I suggest you take only what you can carry because you do not have a car anymore. I canceled the lease on the sedan this morning. She stared at me in horror, realizing the totality of her defeat. She had no husband, no lover, no house, no car, no money. She was starting over at 69 years old with nothing but a bad reputation. Cyrus, please, she wailed, tears ruining her makeup. I am an old woman. I have nowhere to go. I leaned in close. I wanted her to hear this. I wanted it to stick. You should have thought about that before you put on that red dress, I said. I turned my back on her. I walked away. I heard her sobbing behind me, calling my name, but I did not stop. I did not look back. I walked out of the ballroom and into the cool night air, leaving her alone in the ruins she had made. The valet brought my car around. It was not my old pickup truck. It was a sleek black luxury sedan with tinted windows and a leather interior that smelled like success. I had bought it 2 days ago with cash from the secret account. It was the first thing I had bought just for myself in 40 years. I tipped the valet $100 and got in. The door closed with a solid, heavy thud, shutting out the noise of the city. I started the engine. It purred like a jungle cat. As I shifted into drive, I saw movement in my peripheral vision. Someone was running out of the hotel entrance. It was Jasmine. She had lost her shoes. She was running barefoot on the concrete, her expensive dress flying behind her. She looked frantic. She looked desperate. She ran up to the car and banged on the window. Dad, please wait, she screamed. I looked at her through the glass. She looked like a stranger. This was the girl I taught to ride a bike, the girl I walked down the aisle, and she was the woman who wished I would die sooner so she could pay off her husband's gambling debts. I lowered the window just 2 inches. The night air rushed in, carrying the sound of her panting breath. Dad, I am so sorry, she gasped, gripping the door handle. You have to help me. Garrett is in jail. They set his bail at $50,000. We do not have it. They are going to keep him locked up. You have to help us. He made me do it, Dad. I was scared. He threatened me. I looked at her. She was still lying. Even now, at the end of the world, she was trying to manipulate me. She was not scared of Garrett. I heard the recordings. She was his partner. She was the one counting the money. I did not help you, Jasmine, I said, my voice calm. I saved you. I stopped you from becoming a murderer. No, Dad, please, she begged, tears streaming down her face. I have nothing. They evicted us. I have no money for a lawyer. I have no money for rent. What am I going to do? I looked straight ahead at the road. The street lights stretched out in a long line leading away from this place. I gave you a chance, Jasmine, I said. I invited you to my house. I offered you a legacy. I offered you a lesson in character. But you looked me in the eye and chose the money. You chose the easy way. You chose him over me. Dad, she sobbed. Please, I am your daughter. I looked at her one last time. You made your choice, I said. You wanted the money so badly, well, you got what it bought you. You got a husband in a cage and a mother on the street. Use whatever cash you have left to hire a lawyer for your husband. You are going to need a good one. I rolled up the window. She screamed something, but the sound was cut off as the glass sealed shut. She banged on the window one last time, but I took my foot off the brake. The car surged forward, smooth and powerful. I watched her in the rearview mirror, standing barefoot on the curb, getting smaller and smaller until she was just a speck in the darkness. I did not feel guilt. I felt weightless. I had cut the anchor loose. I drove through the city, the lights blurring past me. I did not turn toward the suburbs. I did not turn toward the old house with its creaky floors and bad memories. I headed for the highway. I headed east toward the coast. I had bought a condo 2 days ago, a penthouse on the top floor of a high-rise overlooking the Atlantic Ocean. It was glass and steel and light. It had no history. It had no ghosts. It was a blank slate. The drive took 3 hours. I drove in silence, listening to the hum of the tires on the pavement. I thought about my life. I thought about the buildings I had built, the foundations I had poured. I had spent my whole life building shelter for other people. Now I was finally building a life for myself. I arrived at the building well past midnight. The doorman greeted me with a nod. "Good evening, Mr. Blackwood. Welcome home." Home. It sounded strange, but it sounded right. I took the elevator to the penthouse. I unlocked the door and walked in. The apartment was dark, but the moonlight reflecting off the ocean filled the room with a soft blue glow. I walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows. Below me, the ocean was a vast, restless beast rolling and crashing against the shore. It was powerful. It was endless. It did not care about money or lies or betrayal. It just existed. I walked to the kitchen and opened a bottle of wine I had stocked there. I poured a glass. The liquid was dark and rich. I walked out onto the balcony. The wind was strong up here, salty and cold. It whipped my jacket around me, but I did not button it. I wanted to feel it. I wanted to feel the cold to know that I was still alive. I stood at the railing looking out at the horizon where the black water met the black sky. I was 71 years old. I was alone. My family was gone. My wife was gone. My past was gone. Most men would feel broken. Most men would feel like they had lost everything. I took a sip of wine. It tasted like victory. I had not lost everything. I had lost the things that were dragging me down. I had lost the leeches and the liars. I had kept my dignity. I had kept my mind. And I had kept enough resources to live the rest of my days exactly how I wanted to. I raised my glass to the ocean. To Cyrus, I whispered to the wind. To the man who survived. I was alone. But for the first time in 45 years, I was free. And looking out at that endless open water, I knew that the best part of my life was just beginning. This was not the end of the story. This was the start of the sequel. And this time, I was the only one writing the script. They say blood is thicker than water, but I learned the hard way that sometimes blood is just a stain you have to wash out to get clean. I spent 45 years building a shelter for people who would have happily watched me freeze just to sell the firewood. My biggest mistake wasn't loving them. It was forgetting to love myself enough to set boundaries. True wealth isn't found in bank accounts or property deeds. It is found in the peace of mind that comes from knowing the people around you actually respect you. Never let your history with someone keep you prisoner in a future that destroys you. Sometimes you have to burn the bridge just to stop the enemy from following you. If you have ever had to cut off a toxic family member to save your own sanity, hit that like button and share your story in the comments below. I want to know I'm not alone. I 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 know